Hey hunters! Welcome back to the only HXH audiobook cult on YouTube. First new fanfic after the break, so hopefully you guys will enjoy. We've got Hunter is in full control today. This one was in Chinese fanfic and I did have to translate this chapter by chapter fixing grammar and names and terms. So PLS like for my suffering. And like usual, check out the author and the original work in the description. And show them some love. Also check the community tab. We're not bots endlessly begging for subs. We actually post stuff there sometimes. If you like the audiobooks, a like on the vid would help. Also of course sub if you're not already and officially become an hunter. Okay. That's it. Let's dive in now. Peace. Love y'all. Headphone emoji, blue heart emoji. Chapter 1. This was a simple, dilapidated shack. A few wooden frames held up a filthy tarp, low, grimy, and messy. Beneath it, a boy who looked 4 or 5 but was actually 6 crouched in the innermost corner, busy fiddling with old wires, discarded radios, broken computers, and more. His face was caked with dirt. The clothes on his back were either taken from a dead body or stolen off a living one, it was hard to tell. Even beggars in the cities were cleaner than him. But no one paid attention to such things here. This wasn't a city found on any map, this was Meteor Street. Meteor Street? A place where lives are as short as shooting stars? His rumbling stomach reminded him that if he went one more day without food, he might just become one. I'm still not used to it. What a pity. Why couldn't I have been a psychopath in my past life? At least then I'd be better suited to surviving in Meteor Street. With a bitter sneer, the boy habitually brushed the dirt off his clothes, even though it was just mud that had caked on during a rainy scavenging trip days ago, then crawled out of the shack, determined to survive. Are all the people living in Meteor Street mentally unwell? He hid behind an old iron sheet, silently observing the children fighting over a few scraps of bread dropped from a garbage airship nearby. He quietly gathered his strength, waiting for the right moment to strike. When did he ever imagine he'd live like this? From a life of wealth and privilege, he fell to this state almost overnight. His previous death had been abrupt, shocking, and hard to believe. After all, who would expect to be killed by the daughter they had loved, raised, and trusted for half their life? And it was all because of a few words from some man. He had thought the moment he closed his eyes would be the beginning of eternal darkness. He never imagined that after that darkness, he'd open his eyes to a sky choked with smog and a mountain of trash. He awoke in a young body lying among corpses and blood, evidence that he'd inherited another life. The body was that of a child, one who should have been carefree but was instead struggling every day just to survive. The name of that child was Night. He was thankful for one thing, his love for passion and fighting, and his interest in flipping through a manga called Hunter x Hunter. That, plus a few years of inherited memories, gave the new Night, let's call him that for now, a basic understanding of the brutal beauty of Meteor Street. Still, knowing and adapting were two different things. He couldn't adjust overnight, even with a new body and soul. Fortunately, the original Night had already awakened Nen, developing an ability to control human bodies. With that power, the new Night had managed to survive the harshest period after his reincarnation. The brawl over the bread was nearly over. 2 kids, clearly allies, had secured the box. The rest either fled, collapsed wounded beneath trash piles, or stared longingly, unable to act. Now it was Night's turn. He wasn't fast or strong, but he had willpower, and that determined the outcome. The loser would die. Night had one rule since his rebirth in Meteor Street: never leave behind anything that might become a threat. Even if the 2 children appeared helpless now, they had to be eliminated. Uncontrolled variables must be destroyed, no matter how long it took. Back in the shack with his spoils, Night took a sip of water, collected days ago in a cracked basin when it rained. He carefully transferred some to a plastic bottle and hid it in a hole he had dug in a corner. Without food, one could survive a few days. Without water, not even 3. That was true for adults, let alone a child like Knight. He ate one piece of bread and stashed the rest. It would have to last him 3 days. He needed time to refine his Nen ability, which required long periods of thought and experimentation. Sustenance, even minimal, helped. The original Knight's Nen allowed control over human bodies. But the new Knight understood deeper things, like entanglement, destruction, training, and release. One soul, 2 sets of memories. The benefits were clear. His imagination and vision far exceeded those born and raised in Meteor Street. He wanted to channel his Nen through an object. His first attempt was with a PS controller, since he'd been a gaming expert in his past life. But it was too fragile, and more importantly, too conspicuous. It had to be scrapped. Now, Knight aimed to create a device resembling a remote control. Why not use the original Knight's weapon, a mobile phone? Because this was Meteor Street. He had no comrades to call, no network to use. He was a 6-year-old child without the means to seize better resources. All he had were scraps scavenged from the dump. He'd even worked hard to acquire a solar charging sheet. Without knowledge in electronics, he couldn't fabricate chips, and besides, a phone was too large for his small hands. For someone like Knight, used to hiding, it was best to keep destiny firmly in his own grip. Meteor Street lacked not only food, but education. That frustrated Knight. Dirty clothes? Irrelevant. You were lucky to have clothes at all. Bathing? A fantasy. You were lucky to have water to drink, let alone waste. 1 day, 2 days, even 2 weeks, none of it mattered here. But what truly annoyed him was the incomprehensible general text in Hunter books. Ignorance was a burden. After 2 days of crafting the remote control, Knight collapsed on his makeshift sponge bed. He glanced over at the dozens of scavenged books stacked in a corner. Chapter 2. He let out a long sigh. It seemed that in addition to training his body and cultivating his Nen ability, he also needed to find someone to take care of him. Meteor Street was a place abandoned by God. It was where everything the world wanted to discard ended up. Garbage, medical waste, nuclear residues, corpses, and abandoned babies, Meteor Street accepted them all. People there would raise abandoned babies for various reasons. Knight's inherited memories included a man who raised him until he was 4 years old, an ugly pedophile. He adopted Knight purely out of perverse desires, and he didn't adopt just one child. Knight didn't know what the original owner of the body had felt when he saw another adopted child suffering beneath that man's body, but it couldn't have been a good memory. Because it was at that time that Knight awakened his Nen. In Meteor Street, there weren't many literate people, and even fewer who were proficient. That man was one of them, which gave him the power to indulge in his twisted desires and take whatever he wanted. There were no fools in Meteor Street. A child who awakened Nen could be trained into a useful tool. That's why Knight was spared even worse horrors in his early years. But life in Meteor Street was short. When he was 4, the man went out and didn't return for 2 days. Knight resolutely gathered his belongings, killed all the other children that man had captured, and left the relatively safe shelter behind. He continued surviving in Meteor Street, until the day he was killed during a food snatch, which allowed a foreign soul to inhabit his body. At first, I just wanted something, Knight sighed. He wanted food to survive. He wanted clean clothes and fresh water to live in comfort. He wanted to surf the internet, to travel, to earn money, to be free. But everything hinged on one thing, becoming stronger. Yes, everything was for that purpose. Even learning was a means to that end. Miscalculation times favor times the next step to becoming stronger. Knight had never rummaged through garbage in his previous life, and even since being reborn into this body, he hadn't either. All his food had come from robbing others. But today, he'd spent half a day digging at the base of a trash mountain near his shack, the longest he'd ever spent foraging since coming to this world. He was waiting to see if anyone nearby might be willing to take him in. This was District 5 of Meteor Street. The higher the district number, the worse the conditions and the more intense the violence. District 5 was considered mid-tier, not the most populated, and the supplies dropped from the airship were relatively simple. Besides a small amount of food, the area only received electronic waste. There were no dangerous metal scraps or blunt weapons like baseball bats or iron pipes, making the environment more stable. Still, occasional raiders from other districts showed up, which was a headache. In District 5, aside from the district chief, who lived in a large house at the center and led the biggest faction, there were dozens of small gangs. Some were made up of adults, others of children under 10. Knight didn't join any of them. Having once paid for betrayal with his life, he no longer trusted others. And after spending over 3 months reborn in Meteor Street, he had seen many of these small groups rise and fall. The children born in Meteor Street were forced to be cunning, selfish, and ruthless. But very few possessed the foresight or strategy to consider the bigger picture. They only saw the present. They would kill strangers over moldy bread, fight stronger enemies just to obtain a self-defense weapon. They didn't plan. They didn't look ahead. Knight refused to join such hopeless mobs. He was from Meteor Street, so he'd learned to act ruthlessly and to disregard life. But he was also not from Meteor Street, so he thought long-term and acted with precision. So he remained alone. Fortunately, there was an unwritten rule in Meteor Street: adults were not allowed to attack children. While not everyone followed this, at least there weren't many pedophiles. If you avoided falling into the wrong hands, survival wasn't too difficult. Still, Knight needed someone to take care of him. But with the calm mind he cultivated through decades of life in another world, he never let himself show impatience. But what now? Knight glanced at a half-broken TV screen just half a meter away. Its reflective surface showed his current appearance. His golden hair had been carefully washed several times in the rain the day before and now looked clean. Though his facial features hadn't matured, his handsome, baby-faced charm was evident. He flashed a sweet smile he'd practiced for ages. Shouldn't someone be willing to adopt a child like him? Yes, since last week, Knight had been sprucing up. He wore his best expression, the fake smile he'd mastered in the business world of his past life. Anyone who saw him would think, what a well-behaved child. But no one approached him, not even the other scavengers in the garbage dump. Hey, you're too clean. You obviously look dangerous. Who would mess with you? It was boring. Knight sat atop the tallest trash pile nearby, picking up old copper wires and worn-out chips, tossing them into his canvas sack. It was getting dark, but he was so disappointed he hadn't done anything else. His mindset from his past life had hindered his current judgment. He only now realized there were no child-rearing adults in Meteor Street. No adult would adopt a child who clearly had his own agenda. Using past life logic in Meteor Street was a misstep. He'd have to adapt not just to the environment, but also to the mindset. Otherwise, he'd continue to embarrass himself. Fortunately, no one knew what he'd been scheming. Covering your ears while stealing a bell. Hello? Someone called out? He didn't recognize anyone. He'd never even exchanged names with anyone. But out of habit, Knight looked up. The sky was dim, and most people had already gone home. In the distance, about 30 to 40 meters away, stood a man in an old jacket. The man looked to be in his 30s, about 1.8 meters tall, with messy brown hair. He carried a snakeskin bag and had a slouched posture, his face full of impatience. Knight had seen him many times. He was a fellow lone wolf, quite powerful. He left a deep impression. But they'd never interacted. Right? Knight tried hard to remember. The body's former owner didn't seem to have any connection to him. I'm calling you, idiot. The man shouted again, brows furrowed and clearly losing his patience. Yes? Is there something wrong? Knight responded with a smile. You're still out here at this hour? You trying to die? His tone was harsh, but Knight didn't sense any killing intent. So what was this guy up to? Feigning confusion, Knight tilted his head and said, Huh? With innocent eyes. TCH. That smile is so fake, the man scoffed. Do you know Ram, the guy who lives in the east corner? He said 2 days ago that he's challenging the district chief tonight. This area's the battlefield. His meaning was obvious. If Knight stuck around, he'd likely get caught in the crossfire. Ah, thank you, Knight said, genuinely surprised. In Meteor Street, there were no busybodies. And he didn't even know this guy. Still, his tone had been really annoying. Knight had been holding that smile for so long, even he knew it had become stiff. Of course it didn't look natural. Nevertheless, he smiled and thanked him. The man muttered something and left quickly. Knight didn't dare linger. He packed up the few items he collected and hurried back to his shack. Chapter 3. His face turned livid in an instant. Reflect. He needed to reflect deeply. There was something crucial he had to start doing from now on. Why hadn't he noticed that the scavengers in the garbage dump had left earlier than usual today? They clearly knew what was going to happen. And yet, he had to be reminded at the last moment by someone else. If not for that person's meddling, he likely wouldn't have lived to see the sunrise. He had clearly neglected many details while focusing on improving his Nen ability these past few days. That was a serious oversight. So, silently, Knight made a decision in his heart: he must become the most well-informed person in the world. Is this why Knight later becomes the troop's intelligence and information handler? That person. I need to return the favor when I get the chance. He muttered this to himself with no expression. In this shack, where he lived alone, Knight had no need to wear a smile. With a frown, he bit into a piece of moldy bread, then pulled out the items he'd scavenged that day from his canvas sack: a dozen small nuts, thin copper wires, insulating tape. Alongside the recyclable bits were several heavy, compact transformers, typically found in desktop computers or old TVs. They were practically worthless for trade, but perfect for one thing: weight training. Knight's physical stamina was poor. He didn't know whether that was due to malnutrition or neglecting physical training while focusing on Nen development. But now that his Nen ability had matured, more on that later, it was time to train his body. That night, gunfire rang out endlessly in District 5 of Meteor Street. That night, the residents waited tensely for the outcome of the battle for District Chief. And that night, Knight used the materials he had to craft a crude, ugly, but practical weighted vest. Another idea times meet again times chat up. Since his plan to find someone to raise him had failed, Knight decided to move on to the next best strategy: find a relatively powerful force to align himself with. This is a technical job, Knight sneered. He strapped on the awkward weighted vest, withdrew his aura into a state of Zetsu, and threw on a large gray cloak that covered his entire body. Then he put on his trademark fake smile and crawled out of his makeshift home. Finding a group to join was easier than finding a guardian. As long as he could fight or prove his Nen ability useful, that would suffice. However, betrayal was second nature in Meteor Street. No leader would immediately trust a newcomer. They had their own trusted allies. If Knight joined recklessly, he'd be used as cannon fodder. That's why choosing the right group, and observing carefully, was essential. As usual, Knight headed toward the eastern garbage dump, curious about what last night's battlefield looked like now. He also hoped to find useful leftovers, knives, iron rods, or anything else. Wow, that was intense. Knight clutched his chest and acted exaggeratedly shocked. He looked carefree, but he was genuinely shaken. The massive trash mound that stood there yesterday had vanished. Whether it was an incendiary bomb or some other explosive, a massive scorched crater had replaced it. Smoke still curled up from several spots, and the air reeked of burnt garbage and blood. Using Gyo, he could detect lingering traces of aura that hadn't yet dispersed. The ground was stained with blood, though the bodies had been cleared away. Knight uncovered a black dagger from the rubble, wiped it clean, and tucked it into his bag. Gradually, more people arrived and began silently scavenging the battlefield. Without a word, Knight shifted to a quieter area, subtly observing, searching for someone worth aligning with. He'd only had this body for a few months. He'd spent that time adapting to life in Meteor Street and developing his nen. He was a recluse, with no real experience interacting with others here. The original owner of this body had partnered once with a younger boy, but both were killed during the same conflict. Their relationship had been purely utilitarian, guarded, transactional, and temporary. They ate together while scavenging, but never shared living space. Knight found that kind of life exhausting. But really, who in Meteor Street didn't live that way? He was saddened to realize he could no longer return to his past life mindset. Before sleeping, he always had to rig traps around his shack. While resting, he stayed half awake in case of ambush. Before going out, he buried valuables in a pit 50 meters away. While scouting during the day, he only targeted isolated people, striking in deserted alleys. He never spared anyone, be they old, weak, women, or children. Had he become a monster without noticing? Frustrated, Knight shrugged helplessly. Whatever. This was Meteor Street. What else could you expect? He scanned the crowd one last time. The fake smile on his face briefly froze. Perhaps he was too hasty. The battle for District Chief had only just ended. The power balance in District 5 would be in flux for days. No faction would want to recruit strangers right now, who wouldn't suspect spies. Still, he turned to leave. A cold glint flickered in Knight's smiling eyes as he began walking away. That's... He paused. There, standing atop a garbage mound, was the same man in the tattered jacket from the day before. His messy brown hair fluttered in the wind. Because he was turned away from the light, his face was shadowed. One foot rested on a cracked computer monitor. His arms were crossed as he surveyed the people below, some returning empty-handed, others scavenging desperately. That pose. It was so smug it was almost aggravating. Still, Knight approached and stopped about 20 meters away. "Thank you for yesterday," Knight called out with a cheerful smile. The man hadn't reacted when Knight started walking toward him. Now, he glanced over for a moment but didn't respond. TCH. Knight cursed inwardly, quickly hiding his frustration behind another smile. He felt embarrassed, but it was his own pride from his past life acting up. He understood now, in Meteor Street, only strength could earn dignity. So he moved closer with a thick-skinned grin. Still, Knight said lightheartedly, those gunshots last night kept me up. I'm still a little sleepy." He even yawned for effect. Whether the man heard or not, he didn't respond. But Knight had already said his piece and didn't feel awkward anymore. Smiling, he added, "That guy Ram, he must have failed. Otherwise, things wouldn't be this quiet. I heard he was strong, but... This is Meteor Street, after all. Meteor Street, where life is worthless." Knight suddenly felt melancholic. The version of this body in the manga had grown up and joined a traveling troupe, but this body had already been handed off to another soul. There was no telling if he'd be killed again and the body inherited by someone else. That would be unsettling, to say the least. "You're so young, but you act so old-fashioned." The man suddenly spoke. Veins popped on Knight's forehead. The somber mood shattered instantly. He turned away in reflex, and the motion lifted his cloak, exposing the clunky weight vest underneath. "Yesterday you were passable. But today..." TSK. The man's sharp gaze scanned Knight, a flicker of contempt in his eyes. This guy is strong. Knight's nerves tightened. They'd been only 10 meters apart moments ago, yet the man had appeared beside him without a sound. Could it be his Nen ability? Chapter 4. Still maintaining a pleasant smile, Knight looked straight into the man's eyes and chuckled, "There's nothing I can do. I just want to become stronger." So even though the weighted vest was so ugly he had to hide it beneath a cloak, he wore it anyway. The man studied Knight, as if pondering something. Half an hour later. "I'm seriously going to lose it." Knight felt his mouth twitch. What a weirdo. Did I judge him wrong? It's going to be tough to team up with this guy. Your smile is so fake, it's ugly. The man's sudden voice pierced Knight's thoughts. What? He said the smile was fake. Knight jumped up, fuming. Anyone holding a 30-degree smile for half an hour in front of someone would get stiff. He wasn't some taxidermy specimen. Just as he was about to snap back, the man turned and disappeared over the other side of the garbage heap. Fuming, Knight cursed internally. If I didn't owe you a favor, I wouldn't waste my time trying to get close. Humph. If you don't appreciate it, then I won't bother again. Fighting times ability times torture under a smile. Despite the unchanged smile on his face, anyone could see the dark, stormy aura behind Knight. He pulled the cloak back over himself where the man had yanked it off and stormed toward another garbage mound. He was angry, furious, and itching to vent it on someone. Hey, where'd this brat come from? This is our turf. A skinny, monkey-like man jumped in front of Knight, arms akimbo, eyebrows raised. He stood half a meter taller, already in a fighting stance. Oh, I'm just passing by. Knight smiled and took a step back. I'll leave right away. That won't do. You gotta leave something behind, don't you think? A man in a gray coat stepped out from the garbage behind Knight, blocking his exit. Yeah, I saw you pick something up over there. Hand it over. This time it was a teenage girl on Knight's right. But her dried-out face and emaciated body made her look 20 years older. Sorry, Auntie, that's mine. Can't just give it up like that, can I? Knight's tone was casual, his smile unshaken, but his words were sharp. The girl's expression instantly darkened. In a flash, she lunged. The light from her crude blade reflected sharply, it was aimed straight at Knight's neck. But Knight, only about 1.2 meters tall, simply ducked. Her attack missed completely. In one motion, he drew the dagger he just scavenged and slashed in the opposite direction. Blood sprayed. The girl stumbled forward from the momentum, but the fire in her eyes had already faded. Her body crumpled to the ground. The makeshift knife, fashioned from a metal can, clattered beside her. Knight remained smiling, unmoved. No one reacted to the dead girl. The skinny man launched a punch straight at Knight's face, fast and sharp enough to whip up the air. Knight tried to dodge right, but Monkey Man was quicker. The punch landed on Knight's left cheek, knocking him down. Rolling, Knight reached for the girl's dropped blade and, in a single motion, hurled it. The blade shot forward like an arrow, piercing the man's face and splitting his skull nearly in half. Behind him, the man in the gray coat had caught up and was swinging a baseball bat, aiming for Knight's head. But the bat stopped. 2 centimeters from Knight's skull. Phew. First day wearing a weighted vest. Guess I'm a little off my game. Got injured by these guys. Knight stood up slowly. Half of his face was swollen. He brushed himself off and scowled at the blood on his cloak. Dirty again. TCH. Wonder if it'll rain soon. This much blood might attract scavengers. But whatever. Haven't I killed enough people by now? After searching the bodies, he found nothing useful, except the skinny guy's shirt, which he stripped to wear. Glancing at the man who stood motionless, Knight shrugged. Too bad. My ability can't make people tell me their secrets. I can only control their bodies. So I have no idea what's going on in his area. Whoever benefits from that is lucky. He sighed. Guess I'll need to learn hypnosis or something to patch that weakness. Despite his words, his face showed no regret. All right, let's go, my lovely puppet. We've still got plenty of time today. Knight stretched, turned, and headed back toward his shack. The man in gray followed like a zombie. His eyes were lifeless. Faint mechanical flickers occasionally sparked from the tattered fabric at his feet. Knight's Nen ability, human chip. Description: insert a self-made, materialized, chip into a person's body, then control them using a self-made remote. Activation rules: the chip must be in Knight's body until it is implanted. Others cannot insert it for him. Controlled targets cannot reveal their memories or secrets. Only physical actions are controllable. Multiple people can be chipped. They live normally until activated. Upon activation, they lose memory of the control period. The stronger a person's aura control, the lower Knight's control effectiveness. Knight can chip himself, but side effects are severe. This is a forbidden move. Note: this ability has been altered for the fanfiction's time travel plot. It does not need to match canon. Don't argue with me about this, I won't listen. Even without formal training in torture, Knight had picked up several effective interrogation techniques since his rebirth. Now, the man was tied to an iron rack. His tendons had been severed. With the control deactivated, Knight watched with a smile as the man screamed in agony. He waited until the man's voice went hoarse, then finally asked, "Done? Ready to answer my questions?" Yes. Yesterday made Knight realize how out of touch he was with current intel. In Meteor Street, strength alone wasn't enough. A brute could die faster than a decent information dealer. But this place was built on lies and betrayal. If you wanted reliable info, there were only two options: pay through the nose for it, or extract it yourself. I think Phaeton doesn't just torture for fun. It's likely Krollo assigns him that role too. After all, very few abilities like Pike's exist, and resisting memory extraction must be common. Despite the effort, Knight was willing to try. Alright, first question, Ram. He had several companions in the past. What were they like? He asked. There was no need to ask the outcome of last night's power struggle. Knight was confident in his read. But Ram's death didn't mean all his allies were gone. They might have fled, joined another district, or formed a new gang. Either way, it affected the current situation. Since this man had held a bit of territory, he was likely familiar with the local dynamics, and could be useful. Why, you little bastard? I'm not telling you anything. The man's face was drenched in sweat. But he stayed defiant. Knight wasn't in a rush. He pursed his lips in thought, then picked up the man's own baseball bat and slammed it into his right knee. Crack. Chapter 5. A heart-wrenching scream. Oh, that seems promising. The kneecap is apparently one of the most painful places to strike. Too bad there are only two of them. There was regret in his eyes. No one would believe that such cold, calculated words came from this always smiling child. Ready to talk now? I remember reading that the nerves in the fingers are the most sensitive. Wouldn't that hurt even more? Knight tilted his head and smiled at the man. You want to know too, right? The man stared at Knight like he was facing a demon. The pain was secondary, the fear of unknown torture overwhelmed him. People in Meteor Street lived with death every day, but that didn't mean they were all resilient enough to endure punishment designed to destroy a person. I'll tell you. I'll tell you everything. Just kill me quickly. Interrogation results times situation analysis times danger. Yawning, Knight sat up from his sponge mattress bed. Light streamed faintly through the cracks in his shack. Damn, I actually stayed up late. Guess children's bodies really aren't made for all-nighters, he muttered, licking his lips before hopping off the bed. He had stayed up because of the interrogation last night. Knight's only shelter was this tiny shack. Whether for hygiene or safety, he didn't like filling his living space with blood. He couldn't conduct torture there. Fortunately, Meteor Street districts were large. It hadn't been hard to find a secluded place. After the session, he simply stabbed the man and left the corpse. The interrogation didn't take long, but the round trip had cost time. The man had known quite a bit. One of Ram's accomplices was a spy planted by the District 5 chief. That traitor had secretly allied with others disloyal to Ram, exposing his hideout during his bid to challenge the chief. Ram had died in the resulting ambush, and his surviving allies were executed either by the chief or the spy. So Ram's entire group collapsed, huh? Knight leaned his cheek into his fist, an old habit from his previous life. I remember that old freak tell you had been eyeing Ram's territory forever. But he never dared act because taking Ram head-on meant heavy losses. Now that Ram is gone. Telyu was infamous in District 5, just like Ram. Ram had been known for his strength, discipline, and the large, stable gang he ran for years. Aside from factions openly loyal to the district chief, most other groups maintained a level of neutrality or goodwill toward Ram. The District 5 chief, by contrast, was nearly anonymous, keeping a low profile and avoiding overt command. Telyu, however, was a different kind of monster, more brutal than Ram, and even more perverse. Rumor had it he enjoyed carving out the hearts of his lovers, preserving them in formalin as specimens. Some claimed he had 2 or 3 entire basements filled with such trophies. Though notorious, his fame was overwhelmingly negative. Jealous of Ram's popularity, it was said he hated him with a passion. If Telyu filled the void Ram left behind, District 5 would drown in blood. But Knight's eyes gleamed with interest. The district chief, who managed to embed a spy in Ram's gang, was clearly powerful, and excellent at staying hidden. Someone like that was worth meeting. Still, no point thinking about that now, Knight murmured, his smile fading. He had no chance to meet that person yet. Instead, he should focus on avoiding Telyu's purge. Staying alive came first. The safest path would be to leave District 5. With Knight's abilities, surviving in District 6 or 7 wouldn't be hard. But returning later would be complicated. Retreating in the face of danger, Knight hated the very idea. Doing so once meant he'd do it again. That was cowardice. He'd never become truly strong that way. And in Meteor Street, life was cheap, including his. Death wasn't frightening, the unknown cause of death was. So, he would stay. And he'd need more information, and better planning. New intelligence notes. Sings, male, approximately 35 to 40 years old. Member of Telyu's gang. Nen awakened, ability unknown. Withdrawn, solitary. Evaluation, dangerous. Do not approach unless confident. Layla, female, approximately 20 years old. Rumored mistress of Telyu. No Nen ability. Uses firearms. Flamboyant, luxury-loving, rarely leaves home. Evaluation, easy to handle. Avoid provoking her unnecessarily, may incur Telyu's wrath. Glentai, male. Ialau, male. Shimoki, male, approximately 40 years old. Information broker and arms dealer. Nen awakened. Ability appears to be conjuring Nen blades. Personality. Knight crouched behind a rusty oil drum, watching 2 men fight from 100 meters away. His target was being overwhelmed and had begun begging for mercy. Gaul, I never wronged you. I didn't even leak your intel, why are you? A scream interrupted him. Then silence, as Shimoki collapsed lifeless to the ground. Why? Ha ha. Knowing too much is a sin. The killer, Gaul, looked down at Shimoki with no emotion. His voice was too low for others to hear. "Gall. Sounds like golf ball," Knight muttered coldly as he tore up Shimoki's profile sheet with a sharp shhrkk. Yes, Knight was now compiling profiles on the notable people in District 5. He still didn't understand the strange, tadpole-like writing system of the Hunter world, but Chinese characters worked just fine for personal use. He maintained secrecy, and that had, in turn, sharpened his zetsu considerably. In his notebook, he wrote a new line. Gall, male, approximately 30 years old. Nen awakened. Ability unknown. Cold and dangerous. As he continued writing, the notebook was suddenly yanked out of his hands. Startled, Knight instinctively rolled forward a few meters, then turned to look. It was him. Goyle. The one who'd warned him earlier. And the one who had just killed Shimoki. How did he find me? I was far away, and using zetsu. Am I still that lacking? Strange symbols. Goyle flipped through the notebook, confused. His blank, dead fish eyes looked up at Knight. What's written here? Should I answer him? 100 thoughts raced through Knight's mind before he decided on honesty. I'm gathering intelligence. District 5 won't be peaceful anytime soon. I want enough data to make proper plans. I don't want to die meaninglessly. Oh, Goyle said flatly. He then added, just now, Shimoki asked why I killed him. Want to know the reason? His eyes suddenly gleamed with a murderous chill. A person without strength has no right to know too much. A wave of killing intent surged toward Knight, so strong he couldn't even defend. He was engulfed in malicious nen, rooted to the spot. His smile vanished. Did I miscalculate? Or is this man even more dangerous than I thought? When Goyle asked his question, Knight's instinct was to lie and escape the situation. His logic told him it would be safer. But something deeper, something intuitive, told him to tell the truth. Chapter 6. It would be ideal to win his favor. Making allies with such a strong man would be a great asset. And from their last 2 encounters, Knight could tell this man bore him no true ill will, yet the current situation still made Knight feel a twinge of regret. After awakening Nen, Knight had never come into direct contact with another user, especially not while under hostile intent. He barely used his own Nen to resist, but how could the aura of a 6-year-old compare to that of an adult in his 30s? His vision blurred, his thoughts scattered, and the aura surrounding his body was too frail to hold. The last sensation he had before blacking out was the distinct feeling of his life force draining away. Gyo times District Chief times silent kinship. After nightfall, Meteor Street remained a festering picture of dirt and chaos. The darkness, which should have brought quiet, was broken by intermittent screams and weeping. A rat peeked from a crack in a broken wall, then silently retreated. The buzzing of insects mixed with the distant cries until the chirp of some nameless bird pierced the gloom, heralding dawn. Even in Meteor Street, where the air was thick with the residue of smoke, gunpowder, and poisonous gases, the sun occasionally broke through. But even bright skies couldn't pause the violence. In the tallest building in District 5, sunlight streamed through a dusty window and landed on the boy lying motionless in bed. As if sensing the warmth, his eyelids fluttered slightly. A dim shimmer of golden aura passed over his frail body, then vanished. He wasn't dead. He was still alive in Meteor Street. His body was empty. He could feel the drain the moment he tried using Nen. The sensation was far from pleasant. Knight pushed himself up with both arms, but collapsed back onto the bed, weak and sluggish. You've been asleep for 2 days, a voice said lightly from across the room. Knight looked toward it. The man was leaning against the wall beside the window, arms crossed, one foot propped up casually. He stood in a patch of shadow, hiding any visible emotion. You're awake? You actually look better when you're not smiling. Goyle's flat tone struck directly at Knight's pride. Hey, was his smile really that terrible? He'd practiced that thing for ages. Oh, really? That's too bad, because I love smiling. The words came off mock petulant, and Knight had already put his usual mask back on. His rebellious streak couldn't resist, even if he knew it would provoke the man again. What a cheeky brat, the man snorted. But you're clever. You figured out I wouldn't kill you, right? Ah, well. Even if I had to die, I'd die smiling. If I'm going to lose everything, why die looking pathetic? Knight had guessed Goyle wouldn't kill him. After all, he'd brought him back here to rest. But if he had thought his life was truly in danger, he wouldn't have dared defy someone so powerful. The man was quiet for a moment, then suddenly laughed. Interesting. The laugh vanished as quickly as it came, replaced by the same poker face Knight had seen before. Smart kid. Can you guess who I am? If you guess right, I'll give you a reward. Guess your identity? My intel gathering isn't that advanced yet. Knight frowned in mock frustration. But since there's a reward, I guess I'll try. His eyes scanned Goyle, first his shadowed face, then the clothes, the same worn-out jacket again. Does this guy ever change? He didn't look poor. The room was well furnished. His body was solidly built, strong in posture and proportion. Likes hiding his expression. Clothes are old but clean. From my level, his strength is completely unreadable. He killed Shimoki because Shimoki was well informed but weak. Knight's smile faded as his gaze turned serious. If I had to guess, the chaos about to engulf District 5 is just what you want, isn't it, Mr. District Chief? Oh, right. A little chaos is good. Keeps the rats too busy to scheme against me. Goyle shrugged lazily. Okay, kid. Your reward is generous, come with me. He opened the door and walked out. Knight scrambled after him. Knight still wasn't entirely sure about Goyle's identity. After all, they'd only met 3 times, and each time had been pretty unlucky. There was almost no info about District 5's chief, so guessing was tough. But this building was the tallest structure in District 5. And wasn't that the chief's domain? Goyle walked fast. Knight, still weak, could barely keep up. By the time they reached the 2nd floor, his legs were wobbling. Wow. Without Nen support, my body's useless? I seriously need more training. Though in truth, the issue wasn't lack of strength. Knight had never truly gone without Nen since awakening. He hadn't yet experienced the fatigue of aura depletion. Dragging his half-dead body to the ground floor, Knight entered a quaint reception room. Solid wood furniture, soft-toned wallpaper, it felt serene, almost homely. There was no sign of Meteor Street's usual filth. A man in a neat suit greeted him. Young master, lunch is ready. Please follow me. Young master? Knight chuckled. Then lead the way. I haven't eaten in 2 days. The butler-like man guided him through a hallway and stopped at a door. We've arrived. The master is waiting. Knight gave him a pleasant nod and pushed the door open. Inside was a grand dining room, with a long black table as its centerpiece. Goyle had changed into a white dress shirt, open at the collar to reveal a silver chain beneath. His hair was neatly styled. He sat with elegance, nothing like the rough, middle-aged wanderer Knight had seen before. He was eating. When Knight entered, Goyle stopped and said simply, "Sit." Knight obeyed, still unsure of Goyle's motives. But everything in life was give and take. If he could earn something from this, he wouldn't complain. Besides, his stomach was growling too much to argue. Thus began their strangely peaceful meal. Among Meteor Street's 13 districts, Goyle began after Knight finished eating. All except the last 3, those complete disasters, are run by chiefs appointed by the Elders' Council. They're the real rulers of this place. Knight blinked, not following. He didn't interrupt, just smiled and listened. The elders are far from united. Greed drives them to sabotage each other. Poisonings, assassinations, subterfuge, nothing's off the table. Well, considering people here kill for stale bread, it's not surprising the big players kill over wealth and power. Still, Knight couldn't see what this had to do with him. I had a son. And 2 daughters. Goyle's tone dropped. All of them were murdered in assassination plots. Chapter 7. Oh, how unfortunate. Knight complained with mock sincerity. Goyle must not have been this strong back then, right? So when you were 3 months old, I handed you over to Kroof, said Goyle, expressionless, detonating a quiet bombshell. What? What? Knight scratched his ear like he hadn't heard correctly. What do you mean? Goyle replied flatly, it means I'm your father. That's all? Can someone tell Knight why he suddenly feels like he's stuck in a third-rate romance drama instead of a Hunter-based narrative? What kind of garbage plot twist is this? And who in their right mind hands over their son to a perverted pedophile? No wonder the memories from the original body showed Kroof practically drooling over him, yet still being tolerated. Yes, the same Kroof mentioned by Goyle was the pedophile who raised Knight until the age of 4. And then? After a moment of silence, Knight heard his own voice, calm and composed. New category times 3 years times departure. Knight pressed his lips together and looked down at the cup before him. Glancing up at the man across the table, he asked, I don't understand why I need to take the water divination test again. Didn't you already say I was an emitter? It's necessary, Goyle said simply, pushing the cup forward. That day, when I knocked you unconscious with malicious aura, I saw more than one color in your aura. Author's note, let's add a setting detail here. In this fanfic, when someone uses Gyo, they can perceive different Nen categories by the color of the aura. People with multiple affinities show overlapping colored rings. Really? Knight raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Without hesitation, he placed his hand over the cup and channeled Nen. The leaf on the water trembled slightly, then the water suddenly began to boil. The other category seems to be specialist, the most versatile Nen type. I think you'll be able to develop secondary abilities, Goyle concluded. Specialist, huh? Not bad. Knight smiled, his eyes sharpening as he stared across the table. That might be true. But father, I'd like to know what you plan to do with me next. His tone was calm. This reunion didn't stir much emotion. Perhaps Knight should have been grateful Goyle wasn't pouring on any fake sentiment like guilt or regret. If he had, Knight would have questioned his intelligence. Thankfully, Goyle was a product of Meteor Street, and Knight, spiritually speaking, wasn't his son. So his tone remained neutral, and Knight listened without resistance. What mattered now was, how did this man plan to treat his so-called son? District 5 will be in turmoil for a while. You should focus on learning until things settle, said Goyle. So, he never intended to keep him close. Knight wasn't upset. In Meteor Street, one could never depend on others, even if that other was your biological father. This was fine. He had knowledge to acquire and time to use wisely. Author's note, in many Hunter x Hunter fanfics, Knight is portrayed as a tech expert or skilled hacker. But realistically, unless someone trains him or gives him access to resources, he wouldn't have that knowledge just by scavenging. It's unlikely Krollo would recruit him without demonstrated value. So here, Goyle serves the narrative purpose of providing him access to education. This is his cheap father role. Author's full disclaimer for logic continuity. Anyone who has resources but doesn't use them is a fool. The next day, Knight handed Goyle a list of skills he wanted to learn. With his father being the district chief, Knight assumed, even if he doubled the list, Goyle would find the right instructors. You really don't act like a child, Goyle remarked after reading the list. Of course not. The soul within Knight wasn't a child at all. But Goyle didn't need to know that. Knight gave a gentle smile. "This is Meteor Street, Father." Yes. This was Meteor Street, where children older than 3 were no longer innocent. Their minds were more poisonous than the Kratow marsh serpent's bile, their cunning exceeded the Semelu wetlands apes, and their greed could not be satisfied even by the vast West Sabine Sea. Note: original locations. Kratow Marsh, world's most toxic swamp; West Sabine, world's largest ocean. Goyle gave Knight a long look, then silently left. The next day, over a dozen instructors, recruited through various methods, appeared in the building. Thus began Knight's intensive, 3-year training. 3 years later. 3 years passed quickly. Every second of it, tightly planned by Knight, revolved around getting stronger. He had no time to think of anything unrelated. "You're free to go now," Goyle said one evening after dinner. "Oh? Tired of your illegitimate son?" Knight smiled. He'd uncovered the truth long ago. If he'd been born to Goyle's legitimate wife, he might have ended up like his half-siblings, assassinated. "You've learned what you needed. Don't die for nothing." Goyle ignored the sarcasm. "TCH, you're still so cold, even at a goodbye." Knight's smile faded slightly. In all these years, Goyle never changed. The same dead fish eyes. No warmth. But when acting as district chief, Goyle wore a different face. Could that be one of his abilities? "Where are you going?" Goyle asked suddenly. "Oh? Concerned about me?" Knight grinned, raising his brows. "Don't worry, I won't be hanging around District 5. I hear District 11 has been chaotic lately. Could be fun." Staying in District 5 was never an option. Though Goyle had never publicly acknowledged Knight, and the instructors had all disappeared after their duties were done, too many variables were closing in. Goyle's power was weakening, he was about to marry into another elder's family to hold ground. If Knight stayed, someone might uncover his identity, and that would mean danger. Besides, Goyle never intended to raise Knight as an heir, just to offer him education. Perhaps he feared Knight would become competition for his real future heir. Knight understood. So he would go far. District 11 was no short trip from here. And more importantly, District 11, huh? Not bad, Goyle said mildly. The Elders' Council had little control over the final 3 districts due to instability. The current district chief of District 11 had recently been killed, plunging the area into chaos. The movement of people was impossible to track. For Knight, it was the perfect storm. He tossed his fork onto the plate and stood. "All right, Dad. I'm going to pack up." He turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and one last thing." He looked over his shoulder, grinning. "You might not believe me, but I promise I won't get involved in any of your heir's power struggles. I've got bigger dreams than that." He winked and disappeared through the door. For just a moment, an odd sadness crossed Goyle's cold face, so faint it could have been imagined. "No matter what. You're still my son." His whispered voice echoed faintly in the empty room. Chapter 8. When Knight left, the morning star had just risen. It was 4 a.m., and the sky was still dark. A figure cloaked in black emerged from the tallest building in District 5, and vanished into the night. Though early spring had arrived, the morning wind still carried a biting chill. The pollutants that blanketed Meteor Street year-round had settled into the soil with last year's snow. The land, eroded by decades of filth, no longer held the strength to grow even weeds. A little girl crouched in the freezing air, digging through the trash-strewn ground. Her small hands bled from a sharp cut, but her face remained expressionless. Suddenly, a string of heavy footsteps approached, followed by a hoarse voice barking obscenities. "That kid lied to me. Why hasn't he shown up yet? If he dares trick me, I'll kill him." The voice belonged to a burly, bearded man nearly 2 meters tall. Despite the cold, He wore only a fur robe draped open to expose his hairy chest. His pants were made of some unidentified animal skin, and his boots reached up to his knees. In District 12, a man this well-dressed usually came from a strong family. Clearly, he was waiting for someone. But there was no one else in sight, just the little girl scavenging amid the garbage. He stomped toward her. "Hey! You see anyone come through here?" The girl, startled, didn't respond. Only when he asked again, more aggressively, did she stammer, "No one's been here." "Liar! You dare lie to me?" The man cursed and kicked an empty can aside. Audiobook said, "This guy's reliable. He's late, damn it, I'll kill him." "I'd let go of that idea if I were you. It's never going to happen." A voice called from atop a garbage mound behind him. The man whirled around, instantly on guard. There stood a cloaked figure, about 1.5 meters tall, face hidden by a black mask, save for a pair of bright green eyes. Just as Audiobook had described. "So you're the one who wants to trade with me?" The man's tone was rough. "Try anything funny, and I'll show you what I'm made of. You brought the goods, right? I want the top-grade stuff." "Haha, you've got it backward. You're the one trying to trade with me." The masked figure's voice was light and casual, but its undertone was chilling. "Enough. Where's the damn item?" "I brought the trade goods." The man pulled out a large sack. "Now where's yours?" "I didn't bring it." The man froze. "Are you joking?" The masked figure shrugged. "Not at all. I agreed to meet, not to trade. That's your misunderstanding, not my problem." "You bastard. I'll kill you." The man roared, stomping the ground. He leapt several meters into the air, his fist, the size of a bowl, crashing down toward the masked figure's perch. His nen surged as the blow scattered trash and wind alike. A scream rang out. It came from the girl, still frozen in fear nearby. The mound exploded, debris flying everywhere. The man landed at the impact site, scanning for his target. Nothing. So rude. The boy reappeared 10 meters away, perched beneath a battered sign. His tone carried a hint of mockery. "Why does Audiobook keep sending me idiots like this? Or maybe you're the one who pissed him off. TCH. I'll ask him next time." "You'll have to ask him in hell." The man charged like a wild beast, swearing to rip the boy apart. A bold dream, but you won't live to see it. As the man lunged, the masked boy twisted aside, then stabbed him in the back with a poisoned dagger. "Ugh. Damn. The man's eyes bulged. The neurotoxin paralyzed him almost instantly. Mouth agape, he made strangled sounds. His body locked in a grotesque posture before collapsing, lifeless, after a full 3 minutes. Wow. His enhancement type level was higher than I thought. Impressive he lasted that long. The masked boy, Knight, raised a brow. A wasted trip. I'll have to bill Audiobook extra for this. After leaving District 5, Knight had smoothly entered District 11, now in disarray after its chief was assassinated. Armed with intelligence gathered beforehand, he played 2 rival gangs against each other, weakening them both. The chaos left District 11 without a leader. With no faction strong enough to dominate, no one dared take the top position. In the meantime, Knight seized the opportunity to accumulate supplies. As things calmed, he expanded into information brokering, and gained some notoriety. Thanks to 3 years under Goyle, Knight was extremely cautious about intel. Leaders don't like seeing secrets leaked to the enemy. That's why he chose District 11, which wasn't yet under Elder Council control. Still, he couldn't allow a new chief to rise and become a threat. His best option was ensuring no one gained control. It took 6 months, but he succeeded. During that time, Knight met Audiobook, another opportunist who had survived in the final 3 districts for years. He was well connected, liked by all, but remained independent. After several tests, Knight struck a partnership with him. On occasion, Aoyuoji would send potential clients. Today's dead man was one of them, a reckless, muscle-brained enhancer with a face full of "dupe me" written on it. Knight suspected Aoyuoji never told him about Knight's trading method, no item exchange on first meetings. If that were true, it was a betrayal. Knight was displeased. The cold wind howled. Knight knew standing around wouldn't help. He pulled his cloak tight and turned back toward District 11. Leaping off the garbage mound, he approached the pouch the man had dropped. If his guess was right, it should contain the component he'd been hunting for, a mechanical part he needed. But just before touching it, he froze. I'm being reckless. What if it's a trap? Just because he killed the man didn't mean the man wasn't bait. What if that pouch held a hidden weapon instead of a processor part? Forget it. I'll just build one myself when I get a chance. He smiled and disappeared with a few quick leaps. The garbage mountain returned to silence, though now with a chunk missing. Meanwhile, at the base, the little girl blinked as if waking from a trance. Huh? Why am I here? Then she spotted something. Ooh, what's that? Guess I'll pick it up. Picked up by mistake? Times everyone times Kurlo. 6-year-old Shizuku had a terrible memory. The only thing she never forgot was Franklin, the man who took her in, and where they currently lived. She didn't even know why she dragged this large sack home. Chapter 9. Come on, she had no idea what was in that bag. Why don't you just open it already? Stop asking questions, replied a burly man with an afro, his hand twice the size of Shizuku's head. Before he finished speaking, he snatched up the bag and shook it. It was as light as air in his grasp. Wait, shouted Knight, rushing down the stairs, but too late. The man dumped the bag's contents, several machine parts and electronics clearly salvaged from old equipment, but still unused and functional. What is this? A pile of scrap metal, maybe? The man spat and flung it aside, nearly hitting the tall, stern man sharpening a blade nearby. Yuvagan, you starting trouble? Said the knife holder with a scowl. Haha, I just want to fight. Feels like my bones need smashing. Yuvagan laughed and lunged, dust kicked up as they grappled. Why are they fighting now? Did Shizuku leave something again? Asked a black-haired girl to Franklin, who had scooped up Shizuku and pulled her away. Doesn't matter. They love throwing down, Franklin murmured as he stroked Shizuku's hair. You wouldn't guess tenderness came from that rugged face. And should we just ignore them? This place is falling apart. Shizuku stared wide-eyed at widening cracks in the walls. Nah. Kurlo will calm them down, said Franklin, smoothing her hair. Kurlo, formerly Kuroro, surveyed the mess. These parts look like from a large computer. Maybe even satellite receivers. Useless if we can't modify them. He pocketed the items. Then he called out to Yuvagan and the knife holder. Yuvagan, Nobunaga, finish cleaning up. This is the only house left standing. Instantly, the fighters separated. Too cramped. No fun, grumbled Yuvagan as he stomped over. I haven't had my fill, countered Nobunaga, voice cold. That almost sparked another fight until Kurlo interceded. Yuvagan, go check on Phaeton, he should be back by now. Yuvagan snorted. He's probably dead. I'll go have a proper match with whoever killed him. And he stomped out. Nobunaga followed, sword in hand. They shouted at each other in the distance. Kurlo rubbed his forehead. These unruly companions. Should he enforce rules? He didn't want to keep hunting for new hideouts. Two girls returned. The first had purple hair and golden eyes. It was Maki, cold and expressionless despite her young age. The second, with dull blonde hair, looked a few years older, frowning in silence, Pakinoda. They ignored the clutter and approached Kurlo directly. "Any news?" Kurlo's soft smile seemed to brighten his sharp features. "I found none," replied Maki, emotionless. Kurlo looked at Pakinoda next. "And Pakinoda, any leads?" Her cheeks flushed. "I saw someone who knew Aoyuoji, and he mentioned him once." "Aoyuoji? The info broker from District 11? Kurlo covered his mouth, thoughtful. "Do you recall any details?" "I caught that his partner Jesse knew his whereabouts, and that could be useful." Pakinoda watched Kurlo, waiting for instruction. Kurlo's smile deepened. "Good. Maki, Franklin, stay back. If Uvagin and Nobunaga return, have them help with cleanup. Pakinoda, let's go." He and Pakinoda headed out, moving swiftly through the chaotic garbage piles of District 13. Despite the dirt and disorder, Kurlo remained alert but focused. Memories of corpses and empty faces flickered in his mind. In nearly 10 years on Meteor Street, survival always came first. Kurlo recalled, abandoned in District 13, he died chasing comfort and ambition, through rotten bread, rusty knives, betrayal, gang hunts. He clawed his way onto the Elders' Council, only to realize that gaining power meant abandoning his old self again and again, losing more than he gained. What did he truly earn? What did he truly lose? He didn't know exactly, but each step closer to power made the goal clearer. Reason times, I'm late times Kurlo's rare vulnerability. Meanwhile, Knight was also tracking Aoyuoji, determined to catch the traitor before Kurlo did. "Aoyuoji, you owe me an explanation." Knight's cold green eyes glowed under his hood as he cornered the info broker, haunted by malicious aura. "BBK, what are you saying?" Aoyuoji stammered, terrified. "Don't look at me like that." "Nothing? Then should I jog your memory?" Knight laughed. With a flourish, he conjured a bright blue nen blade. It spun between his fingertips and slashed into Aoyuoji's right shoulder. The pain was electric. Aoyuoji's face twisted with shock and agony. Knight stared him in the eye, expressionless. Chapter 10. The man writhed on the ground, pain and numbness amplified tenfold. His eyelids fluttered. "How does it taste?" "Judging by your form, you haven't reached your limit. Want another round?" A faintly red nen blade appeared in Knight's hand. "No. Please." The man was too disoriented to speak, only begging remained. Knight withdrew the blue blade in mild disappointment and thought, maybe I should have chosen someone fitter to test both blades. He smiled at the man, now limp from earlier torture tools, and said calmly, "All right then, I've tolerated enough." Aoyuoji took a few quavering breaths. His clouded eyes locked on the cloaked boy before him. He'd always considered himself cunning and fearless. After all, he'd survived over a decade in the latter Meteor Street districts. But this Knight, who had swept through District 11 business overnight, shook his world. He was crafty enough to think Aoyuoji couldn't escape any fallout. Rumors said Aoyuoji actually worked for the District 9 chief, selling half-truth intel on command. But this kid's aura, it rivaled that of the District 9 chief. Had fate itself delivered him? The figure who left Aoyuoji's corpse was chillingly calm. Knight paused only long enough to observe a cloaked silhouette under a garbage mound, henning murderous intent in his posture. Talk about bad luck to cross blades here. Author's note: in canon, overlapping nen systems through Gyo is possible but rare. That's why Knight's cross-system discovery was unique. To Kurlo, Jesse, a moderately known informant in District 12, was no match for Kurlo. Their first encounter had left him badly injured. "Please, don't kill me, I'll tell you everything," he pleaded, voice frightened and raw. "What a bother. I don't even want your info," Kurlo said, brows creased. "But since you insist. Then, what do you want?" Jesse's voice wavered, desperate. Kurlo's gaze darkened. "Aoyuoji, you certainly know the name. At his cue, Pakanota stepped forward and grasped Jesse's arm. Jesse rattled his brain. He's that broker in District 11. Before he could continue, Pakanota silently drew a blade and slit Jesse's throat. Confusion and shock filled his eyes briefly. Why? They wanted Aluoji's location. Yet. Killed him? He bled out on the floor. Krilo knelt, checked his pulse, and shook his head. He's been dead 40 minutes. We were too late. He looked up at Pakanota. Let's abort the mission. Move out. She nodded silently. Abort? But we were going to use this to get in with the council. Yuvagin leapt up, enraged. We should have stormed in and taken our shot. No, Krilo said, eyes drifting from his book. Without intel, we can't succeed as elders, too risky. We need alliances first. Yuvagin, you and Nobunaga can keep training, but don't bring chaos here. Sure thing. You wanna pick off someone, just say it. Yuvagin boomed, voice shaking the walls. Crazy as always, muttered Nobunaga, and the two nearly clashed again. Krilo ignored them and addressed Phaeton. Control yourself. Any suspicious targets? Bring them in for interrogation. I've set up a basement for that purpose. He nodded at the skull-masked boy, who responded with a cold humph. Then, looking to Franklin. I recall you saying you wanted to refine your enhancer aura recently, probably to improve your strength. As for your ward. Krilo's gaze fell lightly upon Shizuku, who hadn't awakened then. Franklin quietly replied, I'll handle her. Good. We'll also need to connect with the district leaders of Districts 12 and 13. They'll care about the Elders' Council. Pakanota nodded, Maki remained silent. Krilo yawned wearily. Time to wrap up. Text me when dinner's ready. He retreated alone to his room. Exhausted, Krilo collapsed onto his bed. Inside, he admired the fighters, Yuvagin, Nobunaga, Phaeton, powerhouses with room to grow. Franklin showed promise, and Maki's telepathy skills were impressive. Pakanota's memory reading was evolving. Yet, he still felt alone. Sure, he had disciples, but no equals with whom he could share burdens or dreams. That isolation weighed on him more than any test of strength. He closed his eyes, letting sleep pull him into a rare dream. Aimless times strange brawl times capture. Meanwhile, Knight sat atop a garbage mound in District 13, watching gangs brawl for scraps of food. He supported his cheek contemplatively. Could there be room for him in this market? He felt a hunger, not just for food. A voice interrupted. Little brother, are you gonna stay there all day? Don't you want some food? Hey hunters. Short pause. Sue the YouTube overlords doesn't get mad. Hope you're liking the new fanfic. Anyway, did you know Kurapika was originally a girl? Togashi has confirmed he changed Kurapika to male partway through planning. Now let's keep going. Chapter 11. The man in 2 pieces of thin clothes sat down next to the knight. A gust of cold wind made him shiver, and he quickly pulled up his collar. The knight bit his lip, his cute baby face made him look 2 years younger. I've been hungry for 2 days, I don't have the strength, I can't snatch it from them. His eyes fell on a young man who smashed his opponent's head in a fight for food, and he shrank back in fear. Oh, is that so? I have another piece of bread here, you can take it and eat it. The man took out a crumpled piece of dry bread from his clothes and handed it to the knight. The knight looked at the bread, which was even drier than pickled vegetables, and had no desire to take a bite. He hadn't eaten such low-quality food for a long time. He really couldn't continue acting hungry. The man's headless body rolled down the garbage pile, startling a few guys who were fighting below. When they looked up, there was no figure on the pile anymore. The knight's stomach was still empty, but he walked slowly on the road as if he didn't care, as if hunger made his thinking clearer. The power of one person is limited. Does he really need a few reliable companions? Working alone is freer and more flexible, but many details and aftermaths are hard to resolve. And if he's alone and killed, who buries him? Feeling chilled by such thoughts, the knight laughed toward the sky, shaking off loneliness. Most memories of his past life faded, but the vicissitudes of the past decades remained. He killed people until numb, but lost his longing for life. Isn't that a bit sad? Huh? He sensed a fight nearby. Must be a master. The knight's curiosity sparked, he would secretly take a look. Unless facing real death, he always stayed in the state of Jew. Also, because he'd been caught by his cheap father Goyle, the knight worked harder on the skill. Goyle also said his Jew wouldn't be inferior to that killer family of Kukulshan. He sneaked silently, hid behind a broken wall, and peered at the battle roughly 100 meters away. The numbers were uneven, but the fight was one-sided. A muscular man, bare-fisted, wearing only fur coat and shorts, stood at least 2 meters tall. The ground shook when he punched. He was a brute powerhouse. He was much stronger than the guy the knight saw killed 2 days ago. And the Ronin-dressed fighter was also strong, no one within his circle could escape death. That was his trick. The knight observed and updated his database. As a professional intelligence dealer, he needed keen intuition. These two wouldn't die easily, and might achieve greatness, so they were good to avoid as enemies. Suddenly, a malicious attack hit. The knight flipped with lightning speed, landed several meters back, and looked toward the evil intent. It was a boy about his height. He was 10 years old, only about 1.5 meters tall, with narrow golden eyes full of tyranny under short blue hair, his face half covered by a mask. He held an umbrella-shaped weapon, targeting the knight. Go to hell. The man gave no warning. He raised the iron umbrella and attacked with astonishing speed. The knight dodged frantically, but the wind still slashed several strands of his hair. Hey, I'm just passing by, okay? If you have questions, why don't we sit and talk peacefully? The knight dodged and shouted with a smile. He didn't want needless fights, he didn't provoke this guy, and if he got hurt, he'd be unhappy. Shut up. Brutality burned in the attacker's eyes, and the iron umbrella blows came fast and life-threatening. Hey, don't be so bad-tempered, or you'll age prematurely. A cold light flashed in his eyes. He didn't know why this person wanted him dead. Phaeton said, I just always do this. The knight didn't know. Since battle was inevitable, he refused to back down. His smile was bright, and the 2 daggers he materialized clashed with the umbrella more than a dozen times. Finally serious? Phaeton narrowed his golden eyes. Fighting this man was a whim. If he were really with Nobunaga Uzumaki, he wouldn't be this far away. But who told him this newcomer in District 13 was unknown? Didn't Krilo say to take suspicious people in for questioning? With a cold snort, Phaeton increased his speed another 50%. The plan was tricky. The knight couldn't speak to disrupt his enemy's senses. He barely kept up. If careless, the iron umbrella tip would slash several scars. It hurt. The knight roared. The blue mind blade in his right hand shot toward the attacker's head. At the same time, he stepped forward into danger and inserted a chip controlling human functions into the attacker's shoulder just as the umbrella tip sank 5 centimeters into his own abdomen. Ahem. The knight spat blood. His face was pale, but his smile proud. Thankfully I'm agile, or I'd be dead. He looked at the boy he subdued. Not bad, you're still conscious even with your body controlled. You make a good test subject. The young man was speechless, his murderous gaze never left the knight. What's the point of glaring? Mastered the art of glaring? The knight complained internally, ready to control the man and leave, when a huge bear-like voice roared from afar, Isn't that Phaeton? Ha, he got caught. That guy's strong, let me test his skills. Another holding a knife shouted, "No, my turn first." "It's them." The knight's smile faltered. They knew each other, they seemed companions. He couldn't handle both now, he was in pain. He glanced at his controlled captive and said insincerely, "Please, don't worry, you're fast. Take me and we'll get rid of these two monkeys." Phaeton felt his body move involuntarily. He watched helplessly as his arms lifted the boy he'd been battling and flew away from Yuvagin's group at top speed. In less than half an hour, Yuvagin and company were gone. The blond fox-like boy stopped to confirm direction, then controlled his body to run another few blocks and entered a ruined stone building. The knight jumped off him and triggered a hidden mechanism in a ruin's corner, revealing stairs down to the basement. He said to Phaeton, still furious, "Welcome to my base. You're the first guest." Krolow's expectation times temporary residence times night and Phaeton. "You mean, Phaeton was kidnapped?" Krolow didn't expect these brute force guys to get into such a mess. The moment Nobunaga Uzumaki returned and told him, indifference on Krolow's face nearly collapsed. Krolow, who'd known Phaeton for years, understood his strength well. How many in District 13 could match Phaeton's speed? And he had scorching sun. Phaeton would never be captured in humiliation, even if he died alongside others. "Ah, that guy looks young, 8 or 9 years old, but he fled as soon as he saw us. I really wanted him to see my fist," Yuvagin roared, punching the wall beside him, shaking. Chapter 12. Ashes fell all over the ground. "I'm afraid others are too lazy to pay attention to you." Nobunaga never forgot to argue with Yuvagin and stretched out his hand to disperse the smoke and dust. "Pakinoda, take a look at the memories of Yuvagin and Nobunaga, and then show them to us." Krolow showed no expression, and his surprise lasted only a moment before he calmed down. Pakinoda silently carried out his order, then materialized a telekinetic bullet and shot it into the foreheads of the other 3 people. "He's not from District 13. He looks like he's from the control department." He took control of Phaeton's body and then ran away with him. Krolow thought and analyzed, but he should be quite skilled, otherwise he wouldn't be able to get close to Phaeton. "Maki, what do you think?" The purple-haired girl said coldly, "There's no danger to life. He won't die." "Ha ha." Krolow smiled lightly. "For the time being, we won't go searching for Phaeton, but we must spread the word that we're looking for him." He slowly walked to the window, looking at the desolate open space outside the house, suppressing the inexplicable excitement in his heart. "Who can kidnap Phaeton? I really hope the time I meet you won't be far off. I am the dividing line, time, right now." As a professional intelligence officer, he often traveled alone. For the sake of vigilance, Knight had several secret residences, and this basement in District 12 was one of them. Phaeton glared at the boy who tossed him aside upon arrival, bandaged his own wounds, and began eating bread, completely ignoring him. He wished he could cut off his fingers, peel his skin, and rip apart that grinning mouth. Being bound by someone else's nen and losing control of one's body was a maddening, unbearable feeling. Phaeton swore, if he escaped this, he would make that kid taste the same suffering. "Hey, I almost forgot you were here." The blond boy turned around and pulled down his mask. Phaeton saw a sweet smile on his face, followed by words that made him want to kill. "Hey, I didn't expect you to be so pretty, are you a girl?" Phaeton's face immediately turned black as the bottom of a pot. "No." As soon as he saw the expression, Knight knew he'd touched a nerve, but he was the prisoner here. As a prisoner, Phaeton had no rights. "That's a pity." Knight shrugged and took out a remote control, making Phaeton remove his battle-damaged clothes. "Asshole. Ah, you still have the strength to talk under my control?" Knight tilted his head, surprised. What he saw was a pair of venomous, hateful eyes. The murderous aura was thick. This guy was furious. "Hey, what's wrong?" Knight hesitated for a moment, then shouted teasingly, "Are you shy? But how can you wear such filthy clothes? We're both boys, it's just changing." He smiled at Phaeton, his eyes curving with innocent brightness. Phaeton was stunned. He'd seen that kind of smile before, on Curlow's face. Back when they were young, before they learned Nen, before they were skilled, before they had to fight for scraps, Curlow would often show that innocent yet cruel smile. It was in a moment of trance like that when he became Curlow's partner. But as they grew up, that smile rarely appeared again. "Okay, let me treat your wound first. But you're really fast, I barely touched you." Phaeton flinched. The words were whispered so close to his ear. He stared at the seemingly innocent Knight with fire in his eyes. When did this guy remove his shirt? Was Phaeton's vigilance that bad, or was his mind slowed from being controlled? Either way, he would never admit he'd been tricked by that smile. "Get lost." Phaeton used every ounce of strength to force out those two words. All he wanted was to be far away from this boy. "Oh, you're so hard to please," Knight complained, bandaged him quickly, and said, "Whatever. I've set the control to auto mode. You can walk around in the basement, but you can't attack me or use Nen. I've got work, help yourself." Knight took out a shirt from the closet and tossed it to Phaeton, then turned on the computer at the desk and started working. Normally, Knight would never let someone like Phaeton, who wanted him dead, live. But today, he had the idea of maybe finding a companion or two and didn't want to create unnecessary enemies. Phaeton's words and the attitude of those two enhancers revealed the confidence they had in District 13. Their strength aside, they definitely had strong backing. So Knight decided not to kill Phaeton, for now. Out of caution, the basement Knight brought Phaeton to was only a temporary safe house. It had 2 or 3 small rooms, a supply storage, a study with a computer and books, and a bedroom. There was nothing to reveal his identity. Even if the captive escaped, Knight could abandon the place. So he felt safe letting Phaeton move freely. After regaining control of his limbs, Phaeton wordlessly changed into the shirt Knight gave him, even if it reopened his bandaged wounds. He cast a dark glare at the boy sitting in front of the computer. His heart burned with rage, but unlike usual, he made no move to attack. He wasn't a thinker. His partnership with Curlow worked because Curlow always handled the planning. Though he loved the thrill of a fight, Curlow always calculated risk and avoided danger. Phaeton's job was just to grow stronger. Because of that, Phaeton couldn't understand this boy at all. Wouldn't it be easier to just kill your enemy? Or torture him for intel and then kill him? Phaeton always went straight to the point, direct and brutal. But this smiling blonde boy gave him the same subtle, calculating feeling as Curlow. Fruitless times give up times between two people. The rumor that Phaeton was missing had spread for 3 days. In District 13, and even in neighboring District 12, there was no trace of him, aside from a few people testing the waters. That guy must have been killed. In tense moments, Uvogin always said something brainless. Everyone in the room turned to glare at him like they were ready to kill. "Eh? What? Am I wrong? You think anyone would let him go?" Uvogin wasn't wrong. Phaeton's temper was nasty. Even longtime companions got into fights with him over small things. Others wouldn't put up with it, especially not enemies. Nobunaga narrowed his eyes and said darkly, "Shut up. I didn't say you were mute." Uvogin jumped up, "You calling me noisy? You looking to die?" Nobunaga snapped back, "You're the one itching for a fight. Can't sit still for a few days, how about I fix that?" They clashed instantly. "If you're going to fight, do it outside." Maki, standing off to the side, spoke coldly. Did these two not realize what kind of situation they were in? "Curlow, do you want me to go search for clues?" Pakinoda asked the 12-year-old boy sitting silently on the sofa. Even she was a little afraid of how quiet Curlow had been. What are you asking about? Did something happen? Shanark looked at her guardian with a puzzled expression. Shh! Don't speak. Franklin quickly covered her mouth. Right now, anything that annoyed Krilo would not end well. On Krilo's knee. Chapter 13. He placed the book he had been studying recently on the desk, but at this moment he only used it as an elbow rest. He covered his mouth and thought, the faint impatience rising in his chest revealing his unease. In 3 days, too much could happen. Even Maki's intuition couldn't determine whether the situation was good or bad. All reports so far said the search was fruitless, and the blonde boy seemed to have vanished from Meteor City. Krilo stood up with a trace of disappointment and said calmly, "This matter ends here. Our next focus is infiltrating the Elders' Council, so I hope you all direct your full attention to that. But if you have free time, keep an eye out for the blonde boy's whereabouts. In Meteor City, where people die daily, grieving lost companions is meaningless, but what needs to be reported, will always be remembered." The first day, the day Knight captures Phaeton. He began moving 10 minutes after sitting at the computer. Before that, he had simply gotten dressed and glanced around. Knight had no psychic powers, so he couldn't detect others for no reason. This intel came from the chip implanted in Phaeton's body. While Knight typed away, he kept one eye on the pretty-faced boy who resembled a girl. After dressing, including putting on his mask, Phaeton first meticulously inspected the basement. It took 5 minutes. Knight suspected that with the transmuter's perception and memory, Phaeton probably memorized even the placement of cobwebs. Then, the boy's searing gaze drilled into his back for another 5 minutes. Phaeton had finally confirmed this captor had no immediate ill intent. He checked the Nen suppression in his body. Yes, it was locked down completely. He then tried to project killing intent, but the moment he inhaled, Phaeton felt stabbing chest pain and bent over involuntarily. "Uncomfortable?" said the man without turning. Phaeton was in agony. "I added restrictive clauses to my Nen," Knight continued. "Violating them doesn't cost much. But it'll still kill you if you keep testing it." He turned and gave a serious smile. "You don't want to die so cowardly, right?" "Damn it." Phaeton growled but immediately crouched again from the backlash. "TCH, you really don't know how to assess situations. I'm surprised someone like you survived this long." Knight shook his head. This hot-tempered boy was hard to manage. Maybe letting him learn a painful lesson was good. With that, he turned back to his work. How much time passed? An hour, 2? Phaeton's pain finally eased. Nen built up in his body to a limit but couldn't be used, not even in its simplest forms. He was stuck, for now, having to coexist with his captor. Note: Phaeton had actually attempted to use his suicidal scorching sun technique, stronger the more he's injured, but it failed due to the suppression. Finally, he settled down. Knight smirked. After lying on the floor for 3 hours and 20 minutes, Phaeton stood up and, without a word, opened the fridge, took his food, and ate it. TSK, a bold robbery. Knight clicked his tongue, shut down his computer, stood up, opened a cabinet, and said cheerfully, "All right, time to go out. Staying cooped up isn't healthy. But of course, we can't go out like this. Luckily, my disguise skills are top tier. To throw them off, you'll be dressing as a girl." Phaeton's expression instantly turned stormy, but once again, he lost control of his body. He watched helplessly as Knight pulled out wigs, women's clothes, and jars of unfamiliar items, which Phaeton had no interest in, clearly makeup, and approached with intent. "Get away!" Phaeton growled. He wouldn't allow himself to be humiliated like this. "Don't want to?" Knight raised an eyebrow. "Fine, then stay here. If someone finds you, you won't be able to defend yourself. So if you die, it's your own bad luck." Phaeton's glare grew darker, but he fell silent. Seeing his acquiescence, Knight quickly controlled Phaeton, dressing him in a woman's outfit, adding thick stockings, makeup, and a wig. In no time, Phaeton had become a cold, black-haired girl with pale skin. His eyes were softened and made rounder, a beauty mark painted under one eye, and shadows carefully applied to his nose and cheeks. His sharp features dulled into something delicate. Anyone who saw him now would mistake him for a real girl, even those who knew Phaeton. Satisfied, Knight began his own transformation. This skill, like many others, he'd learned during his 3 years with Goyle. In addition to makeup and disguise, Knight had studied drugs, creation, identification, resistance, interrogation, hypnosis, mechanical tweaks, hacking, and more. Not yet a genius, but someone deeply prepared. Knight's disguise mirrored Phaeton's: black hair, golden contact lenses, pale skin, and similar height. They now looked like a pair of sisters. Yes, Knight didn't care about masculinity. If dressing as a girl created opportunity, he welcomed it. "Let's go, my sweet little Lolita sister," Knight said with a grin, shooting Phaeton a teasing look that deepened the darkness in his eyes. Play times inquiry times Knight's decision. Evening fell. The constant clouds above Meteor City cast a gloomy, shadowy light. Weaker scavengers had already retreated to their nests. Only those with strength or access to firearms dared move about freely now. Phaeton was forced to follow Knight through piles of garbage. No one knew what the boy was doing. For 10 minutes, he wandered, sometimes picking up discarded radios or motherboard pieces, but his ever-scanning eyes hinted at a deeper purpose. "Ha ha ha ha. We scored some real lookers." A fat-faced man suddenly dropped from above, leering at them. "Die." Phaeton cursed internally. He had seen that look before, many times in childhood, but those creeps were long since dead. "You. What do you want?" Knight, who could easily kick the man down, shrieked in mock fear. His trembling hand clutched Phaeton's tightly. "Why ask?" The man laughed. "You sweet things have never been loved properly by a man. Don't worry, play nice, and I'll make it feel real good." He lunged like a wolf. "Ah!" Phaeton only heard Knight scream, then felt himself yanked by the hand, controlled again, and pulled into a run. He burned with rage. If not for the control, he could have crushed the guy with a stick, nen or not. But now he had no choice but to flee. What was this guy thinking? The fat man chased after them. Knight turned into a dark alley and dramatically stumbled, dragging Phaeton down with him. "Hey, now you're mine, little darlings. Be good, or I'll sell you off." The man reached for Knight, just as a flash of metal struck. Knight flipped his hand, and a chip plunged swiftly into the attacker's body. "I am the dividing line." Knight had completely fallen. There weren't many residents in District 12 of Meteor City. Chapter 14. With electricity in use, fewer people were wandering outside. A tall, thin man scavenged a pack of expired milk from someone he'd just killed. When he looked up, he saw a large man carrying 2 girls on his back from a distance. He sneered with jealousy. "Hilton is so lucky, he's got more goods to offer," he sighed, knowing he wasn't a match for Hilton, and walked away. But in reality, Knight lay slumped on the man's shoulder, pressing buttons continuously, controlling Hilton to carry both him and Phaeton back to the basement. Then he released the control on Phaeton, allowing free movement only, and fetched heavy chains to restrain the man. "What are you doing?" Phaeton asked coldly, finally managing to speak after a long silence. "Ah, I just want to get some information out of him." Knight smiled innocently and released Hilton from control. Hilton, still groggy, shouted, "Ha, girl, I caught you. Wait. What's going on? Who tied me up? Was it you? Let me go or..." But before he could finish threatening them, Hilton felt a wave of terrifying pressure radiating from the girl in front of him. Sweat broke out all over his body. He dared not straighten his spine. His pupils shrank. A buried fear exploded in his chest. "Now, are you a bit more clear-headed?" Knight smiled slightly, his eyes flashing with cruelty. Hilton had never imagined the murderous intent in the eyes of a child, no more than 10 years old, could make him almost piss himself. He nodded frantically to show he understood. "I don't need much from you," Knight said, his tone softening as he withdrew the malice. "Just a few questions. Cooperate, and maybe I'll let you go." He leaned closer, a captivating glint in his eyes. "What do you want to know?" Hilton's pupils relaxed, his expression turned blank. Phaeton narrowed his eyes from the side, watching the scene intently. "Let's start simple. Tell me any news you heard today," Knight said casually. "Filial from the Western District took in someone from District 4. Seems he offended someone and ran to District 12. Esser, a subordinate of District Chief 12, died in a shootout yesterday. And also Serrato, he asked me to bring him some pretty tributes," Hilton murmured in a trance. "In District 13, they're looking for someone named Phaeton. The higher-ups told us to keep watch." Knight turned to Phaeton with a smile. "So your name is Phaeton. Your companions are searching for you." Phaeton snorted coldly and turned his head, clearly ignoring him. Unfazed, Knight asked, "Do you know who's looking for him?" Hilton paused before saying, "No. I don't." "Then why are you ordered to look too? That's District 13 business, right?" Hilton muttered, "No idea. Just following orders." Knight's eyes narrowed. He couldn't tell who was spreading this order, but he could guess it didn't come from Phaeton's 2 enhancer-type companions. He chuckled to himself. Whoever this person was, they had authority. Perhaps it was time to raise the stakes a bit. Make this person think twice before coming for revenge. Phaeton noticed Knight's strange expression and felt a bad premonition. "You. What are you planning?" "Nothing," Knight winked. "Life's been a little dull. I just want to play a more exciting game. Don't worry, your part won't be forgotten." Phaeton's alertness deepened, golden eyes flared with anger. "What do you mean?" "Relax," Knight waved him off. "It's getting late. Time to rest. Tomorrow, we'll pay a visit to that guy, Serrato." Serrato, under District 12 Chief Fendick, was infamous for his sadism and penchant for dismemberment. "You." Phaeton growled, but pain from the restraint immediately doubled him over. "Don't be so tense, Phaeton." Knight crouched beside him, voice soft but full of resolve. "Work with me," he said hypnotically. "Maybe you'll meet your former companions soon." Former emphasized. Phaeton was stunned, his body involuntarily relaxing as he stared at the familiar glint in Knight's eyes. Knight times Krollo times control versus bewitching. The day after being captured, Phaeton was sold to a snake-like man named Serrato, along with Hilton. Phaeton didn't want to recall how the boy, whose name he still didn't know, manipulated Hilton into offering them to Serrato, or how Serrato accidentally ended up under Knight's control, or how Hilton was instantly killed. Phaeton, unable to act freely, watched as this boy wiped out all of Serrato's men within days. He had to admit, this control ability was highly practical. Not as destructive as his own transformation Nen, but devastating in its own way. "How did you do it?" Phaeton asked, confused. How did this boy know Hilton was connected to the district chief's tribute ring? Without that back door, they'd never have gotten close enough to chip Serrato. "I have my ways," Knight said slyly, fox eyes narrowing. "But I'm not telling you." Phaeton's face darkened. He returned to his room, mood foul. Gaining trust wasn't going to be easy. Knight had relaxed the control on him. Phaeton could now use his aura again, though not against Knight, but the control chip hadn't been removed. He couldn't leave. After Phaeton left, Knight wiped cold sweat from his temple. Controlling one Nen user was already difficult, two was near impossible. Half his aura was drained. If not for drugs and hypnosis, he couldn't have handled Serato. Relaxing control over Phaeton wasn't strategy, it was necessity. Thankfully, he'd planted psychological triggers to keep Phaeton's aggression dulled. And soon, he would finally meet Phaeton's former companions. The latest news was thrilling. Knight smirked, lips curling in a pleased arc. I went to the dividing line of Curlo. Curlo sat quietly in the most luxurious and tasteful living room in District 13 of Meteor City, waiting to meet someone. He remained motionless, eyes half shut, as if shielding his vision from something offensive. This living room might be described as golden and splendid. Perhaps the owner was trying to project wealth and power. Unfortunately, whether by poor design or sheer bad taste, the mix of bright reds, golds, purples, and blues clashed violently. Artworks worth millions stood beside junkyard bottles and gaudy marble statues next to chaotic abstract paintings. The arrangement, messy yet somehow ordered, assaulted the senses. Curlo had sat in this maddening space for an hour. His heart was filled with anticipation. It was only that excitement which allowed him to ignore how deeply the room grated on his mind. Chapter 15. When he was about 3 years old, his family was destroyed and he was thrown into Meteor City by a stranger, upending the peaceful life he had known. Maybe he once believed in God, but God couldn't save him. So, after killing someone for food for the first time, Curlo tattooed a cross on his forehead, a symbol of self-salvation. From that moment, he only trusted himself. He didn't care about death. He didn't value life, neither others nor his own. The only thing Curlo couldn't compromise on was halting his own momentum. From bread scavenged to survive, to carving out his own territory, to now striving to join the Elders' Council, these were just steps, each one purposeful. Did he care about the council? No. Even if they controlled Meteor City, so what? This city wouldn't limit him. Though his roots were here, his eyes and ambitions were already aimed at the world beyond. But for now, he would wait. Curlo never lacked patience. He liked plans, carefully laid, precisely timed. That's why he liked spiders. In the darkest, wettest crevices of Meteor City lived 12-legged venomous thread spiders. They wove dense webs in shadow and could lie in wait for 10 days without prey. Now, Curlo had woven such a web, awaiting his prey, the owner of this very house, to stumble into it. Finally, Curlo's sharp hearing alerted him, someone was coming. As footsteps approached, he lifted his head slightly. His jet-black eyes met the new arrival's gaze the instant the door opened. The visitor was the mayor of District 13, a woman in her 30s known for cunning and ambition. She wore a fiery red dress, long brown curls, a sapphire pendant necklace, massive gold hoop earrings, and jingling bangles on her left wrist. Her right hand was bare. She stared at Curlo boldly for 3 minutes before her lips, painted in bold lipstick, curled into a smile. Curlo Lucifer? Young and promising. Before today, I thought the rumors might be exaggerated, she said, hips swaying as she approached, bending down until she was 5 centimeters from his face. Seeing his unchanged expression, she smiled wider. Now, I'm quite curious about your plan. Curlo smiled like a gentleman. Of course. I'd be delighted to offer guidance to such a beautiful lady. Good. Then speak, tell me everything, she said, straightening with the arrogance of a queen. Her bare hand clenched, joints cracking faintly. Curlo also rose and gave a graceful bow. As you wish, my queen. He tilted his head just slightly to hide the flicker of sarcasm in his eyes. Women, always drawn to immediate profit. Even this woman, powerful enough to rule District 13, couldn't hide her greed. Curlo saw her coveting the Elders' Council, which controlled Meteor City's resources. So, he might as well use her. Success always demands sacrifices. And neither of them needed to worry about the means, only the result. While Krilo was performing his part to perfection, Night was about to welcome his first potential companion. Invitation times Finks times Night. Stepping lightly, Philyaw knocked rhythmically on the door of Serato's office. After hearing "Come in," he entered. Serato sat behind his desk, papers spread across it, indicating he'd been working. "If you're here to pester me, Philyaw, you know I'm busy." Serato had a nasty temper, his reputation for cruelty wasn't baseless. He glared with heat, making Philyaw break into a sweat. "Apologies, Lord Serato." Philyaw bowed repeatedly. "But I need your approval on something important. A few days ago, I took in a guy from District 4. He's a telekinesis user. Since the district chief is looking for commando candidates, I want to recommend him." Philyaw was confident the man, Finks, would impress the district chief. And his referral might earn him favor, too. Humph. Not just anyone can join the commando unit. Even cannon fodder like you needs to be careful of spies, Serato sneered, suspicion gleaming in his eyes. No, Lord Serato, I've looked into his background. Nothing suspicious." Philyaw rushed to explain. If the district chief didn't trust Serato so much, Philyaw wouldn't be begging this psychopath. Only Serato could get people like that into the team, because Serato had nowhere else to go. "Humph. I don't think you dare lie to me." Serato smirked. "Bring him. I want to see for myself." "Yes." Philyaw bowed deeply and left, shutting the door. He didn't notice the sharp glint in the eyes of the blond boy who crawled out from beneath Serato's desk after he was gone. Afternoon divide. Finks, who had just turned 19, felt like his luck had hit rock bottom. All because of a joke he cracked during a banquet hosted by a powerful subordinate of District 4's chief. Did the guy really need to overreact? Anyone who knew Finks knew he had a bad sense of humor. He was sure that guy just used it as an excuse to eliminate him, a rival. Probably had orders from the top, too. After all, Finks was tough to control. Still, he was furious. Finks glared at Philyaw, the man walking ahead, about to introduce him to District 12's top enforcer. His bloodthirsty gaze could have burned a hole through the back of the man's jacket. So what if he'd fled to the dump that was District 12? He wasn't some pitiful stray. They wanted to throw him into a suicide squad, the commando unit? He could kill them for that insult. "Just wait, Philyaw. I'll rip your head off," he muttered under his breath. They soon reached Serato's office. After a knock, the voice that answered wasn't Serato's, but someone else's, crisp and unfamiliar. When Philyaw opened the door, he saw 3 people. In addition to Serato, seated in the center, 2 girls stood on either side, both with black hair and golden eyes. One smiled sweetly as he entered, but the other glared coldly enough to freeze Philyaw's blood. Are these Serato's new favorites? They're allowed in the office? They must be favored. But that girl with the cold aura, only Serato would go for someone that weird. Author, Phaeton will light up the sun when he hears this. "Philyaw, are you just going to stand there and gawk?" Serato's deep, chilling voice snapped Philyaw to attention. He bowed quickly. "Lord Serato, this is the man I'm recommending. His name is Finks." As he spoke, he stepped aside to reveal the man behind him. "This one?" Serato snorted. "Looks decent. Fine. Leave him. I'll make arrangements." Chapter 16. But, Philyaw hadn't expected Serato to be so careless. What if this guy was scheming something? Serato's eyes flashed with rage, and he spoke through gritted teeth. "Philyaw, you've gotten bold, haven't you? Daring to question me to my face? Or are you plotting something with this kid? Let me tell you, even if he's skilled, the district chief won't trust someone who just arrived here." He narrowed his eyes and barked, "Get out of my office." Philyaw didn't dare say another word. He avoided Fink's gaze entirely and practically fled out the door. Now only 4 people remained in the office. Phaeton was in a foul mood. Why had he agreed to cooperate with Knight and wear that damned dress? That guy must have used his control again. It definitely wasn't because he'd been swayed by the excitement in his eyes. But this Sphinx did look strong. Maybe he'd make a good punching bag to vent his rage. Still controlling Serato, Knight gave Phaeton a calming look, then turned toward the man called Sphinx. He was tall, likely under 25, though his lack of eyebrows made him appear older, and looked annoyed. Even as Filial ran off, Sphinx showed no concern for him. Sphinx's inner monologue, "Just try me, I'll swing you into next week." So that's how it is. A more genuine smile appeared in Knight's eyes. He'd only intended to lure someone into joining him. For someone new to District 12, winning him over before he joined another faction was easy enough, but now, Knight was 80% sure he could make Sphinx a companion. Sphinx was clearly losing patience. That whole speech about him not getting a chance had irritated him. What now? Why the silence? He snapped, "Do you still need something from me or what?" "Hey!" He heard Serato chuckle darkly. Then the grinning girl beside Serato said, "How about becoming my companion?" You. Sphinx immediately tensed. Humph. Phaeton looked away in disgust. So this was what that guy had planned all along. Persuade times meet times the sudden rise of Knight's plan. Author's note, I'm leaving a message here, there's a poll about whether to include a time-traveling female character. In a few chapters, Knight and Krilo will have a big reconciliation, and I'll begin the next arc, which may involve a time-traveling female. If you dislike such characters, please let me know. Sphinx felt a bit bitter. Why had he agreed to become that blonde boy's companion just because of a few persuasive lines? It didn't sit right. As he walked beside the still-controlled Serato, on their way to meet someone from District 13, Sphinx couldn't help but recall what had happened that day. Memory cut. You're really willing to join the commando unit? Sphinx heard the boy, who had removed his wig and contact lenses, revealing his real face, ask. From what I know of District 12 Chief Fendick, he won't trust you, he continued. A suspicious man like him would never put faith in someone abandoned by his last superior. And everyone knows how you ended up in District 12. So what? You think becoming your companion is any better? Sphinx sneered, eyeing Serato, now a blank-eyed puppet in his chair. How long can your little mind control trick fool people? Knight shrugged. Not long. He'll retire soon. He grinned and yanked Phaeton, now fuming and stripped of his disguise, over by the shoulder. I only controlled Serato to meet his former associate. I heard he's skilled, recently charmed the mayor of District 13 and became her personal secretary. If I don't make a splash, how could I ever win over Phaeton as a companion? Yes, Knight wanted Phaeton as a companion. He'd been feeding him psychological hints for a while, planning to subtly replace Krilo's role in his heart. But now he said it outright. He's one of your people, isn't he? Sphinx asked, surprised. Who wants to be this guy's companion? Phaeton growled, both angry and embarrassed. Wait, I never said my name. Knight scratched his head like he genuinely forgot. Let me formally introduce myself. His lazy grin vanished, replaced by clarity. My name is Knight. And you are? Didn't you already know that? Phaeton glared at the outstretched hand, then turned his face and gripped the hand viciously, nearly crushing Knight's fingers. Knight's eyes sparkled. That reaction. He leaned close to Phaeton's flushed ears and whispered, Phaeton, are you being shy and awkward? Get lost. Phaeton exploded in rage and embarrassment. Sphinx watched the two, utterly speechless. He suddenly questioned whether coming to District 12 had been a mistake. As he was wondering if he should try his luck elsewhere, the blonde boy turned to him. Sphinx, what about you? Want to be my companion? or side with me before I face Phaeton's old allies. I'll secure the position you want, Serato will vouch for you, and then I'll make him disappear." His eyes were clear, serious. Finks nodded before even thinking about it. Memory ends. Forget it, why overthink? Finks looked at Knight, still dressed as a girl, clinging to his puppet. He had nothing now, this couldn't be worse than life on the run. This guy had controlled Serato, District 12's second most powerful man, in days. And judging from how he treated Phaeton, this guy was loyal, at least to the people he wanted on his side. Worst case. Run again. Finks silently braced himself. "Serato, you're here," said Fendick, seated in the reception room. He was a slick, short man, tactful with everyone, generous only to those useful. "Yes, Mr. District Chief," Serato bowed. Knight and the others followed suit. "Who's that?" Fendick asked, eyeing Finks beside Serato. "Mr. District Chief, this is my new assistant." "Strange temper, but my kind of man," Serato said confidently. "Please trust my judgment." Fendick nodded. He did trust Serato, who had no power base outside of him. "Of course, Serato. I trust you. But I hear you've become a bit obsessed with women lately." His eyes drifted to Knight and Phaeton, still in disguise. "That's a bad habit. You know what I mean?" Serato laughed loudly, grabbed Knight's chin with force, and said, "They're just toys. Don't worry. Once I'm bored, I'll cut them up piece by piece." Fendick shrugged, satisfied. "Fine. District 13's people will arrive soon. I don't want to see them yet. Go figure out what they want." That Woman, 10. Chapter 17. The head of District 3 underestimates District 12 too much. "Yes, Mr. District Chief," Serato bowed respectfully. Fendick stood and exited the reception room. Phaeton turned his head and looked at Knight, who was still controlling Serato, his grip earlier tight enough to leave bruises, now replaced with an excited grin. A complex light flickered in Phaeton's golden eyes. He knew, without a doubt, that the visitor from District 13 was Krilo. It wasn't Krilo's first visit to District 12, but it was the first time he'd been inside the grand hall used to receive honored guests. The moment Krilo saw the man standing before the door, cold aura radiating from him, he smiled amicably. Of course, he knew such affront wouldn't impress the infamous first underling of District 12's chief. Still, his eyes swept subtly across the three people accompanying Serato. Something about the situation felt off. Krilo, Maki, behind him, leaned in and whispered softly, "The girl on the right, I can feel it." She hesitated almost a full minute before finishing, "He should be Phaeton." Krilo felt as though lightning struck him. Was he hallucinating? But he couldn't verify it yet. Dealing with Serato and ensuring the negotiation went smoothly had to come first. Still, he couldn't help letting his gaze linger on the disguised figure. When their eyes met, he saw a flash of furious embarrassment. Knight leaned slightly against Phaeton's shoulder and smiled. "Is that your former companion?" His gaze drifted to the boy in the black suit at the foot of the stairs. He focused on the faint purple cross on his forehead, partially obscured by hair. In a soft tone, he said, "He looks interesting. Tell me, if I were to compete with him, who would win?" Reveal times bet times people similar to me. Author's note, quick poll, should I include a time-traveling female in the next arc? After a few chapters, Knight and Krilo will have a big reconciliation. Please let me know your preferences. After some brief formalities, which really just meant Knight using Serato to give a seemingly polite yet subtly threatening greeting, Knight then controlled Serato to lead Krilo and his group to his office. The location was far more appropriate for private discussions than the public reception area. The door clicked shut behind them. Maki scanned the room cautiously, but Krilo's eyes never left Serato. Behind him, Yuvagin growled impatiently, What the hell are you playing at? Playing? Knight's dangerous smile returned. I just wanted to meet Phaeton's former companions. With that, he dropped his disguise. You're the guy who took Phaeton that day, Yuvagan blurted out. It was Phaeton. Krolo and Maki exchanged looks, both locking eyes on the sulky figure still dressed as a woman, utterly shocking. Krolo's eyes flicked to Serato, whose face remained blank. Then he turned his attention back to Knight. The situation had shifted dramatically, his original tactics to sway Fendic and Serato were now useless. But he didn't forget his true goal, forging an alliance between the districts to challenge the Elders' Council. Where is Phaeton? Yuvagan asked bluntly. Knight nudged Phaeton, who remained silent, and whispered teasingly, Hey, say something before they think I ate you. What? That's Phaeton? Yuvagan cried, wide-eyed. It took him a full moment to register it, then he burst into hysterical laughter. Ahem. Could you ask your friend to keep it down? Knight said, frowning slightly as Phaeton's face turned darker. The office might be soundproof, but his voice. Krolo had regained composure. Yuvagan, enough, he said, eyes narrowed as he studied Knight. He was intrigued but also annoyed. What was this guy playing at? Yuvagan, still stifling laughter, obeyed, muffling himself with a hand. But Phaeton snarled, You want to die? And lunged. Yuvagan's eyes lit up. Finally. I've wanted to fight you for ages. They clashed immediately. TCH. Knight rubbed his temple. Phaeton's temper was as terrible as ever. The office was going to be trashed again, he just redecorated after the last brawl with Finks. He glanced at Krolo, who was now slightly frowning too. Oh, so this wasn't just his problem. Krolo, noticing Knight's glance, lifted his head slightly and gave a mild smile. May I know your name, the gentleman who captured Phaeton? Knight smiled but didn't answer directly. You're the envoy Ricardo sent from District 13, correct? Well, now that I've interfered, I imagine things will be complicated. Serato had to die eventually, and Knight couldn't leave potential threats alive. Ah, you're right, Krolo admitted openly. Oh, I didn't mean to cause trouble, Knight said dramatically, raking his fingers through his hair. After a moment of mock reflection, he said, How about this, you tell me what Ricardo wants, and I'll pass the word to Fendic for you. Krolo raised an eyebrow. It couldn't be that simple. He hadn't even addressed the kidnapping yet. But Phaeton's reaction toward this guy seemed. No? Knight blinked, then snapped his fingers. Then let's do it this way. I'll still use Serato to help you negotiate, but we'll make it a bet. In this negotiation, one of us will lose. You represent District 13. I'll represent District 12. Loser joins the other side. Sound fair? His eyes locked onto Krolo's, brimming with intrigue. Krolo's heart skipped. This was exciting. This gamble stirred something deep in him. It's a deal, he said, smiling confidently. Knight held out his hand. Then I look forward to facing you. Oh, and, my name is Knight. Krolo Lucifer, Krolo replied, shaking hands with him. When Phaeton and Yuvagan returned, bruised but satisfied, they saw Krolo and Knight chatting like old friends. Krolo, what's going on? Yuvagan asked loudly. Nothing, Yuvagan. Let's head back, Krolo replied. He wasn't just excited, he was intrigued. This Knight was unlike anyone he'd met. Calm in conversation, sharp in intellect, quick to react. He hadn't been in District 12 long, based on his own statements. If Knight were an enemy. Krolo's dark eyes glittered, this bet, this proposal. It meant Knight didn't want to be their enemy. Go back? Just like that. I haven't finished with that kid. And what about Phaeton? Isn't he coming? Yuvagan rattled off questions. No. Not yet, Krilo said calmly. But let's wait. He cast one last look toward Knight, who was now gently wrapping a bandage around Phaeton's arm. Then he turned and walked out the door. What? I don't get it. Uvogin scratched his head. Uvogin, Maki said coldly, Krilo already has a plan. So stop talking. Chapter 18. Uvogin looked at Krilo, who was silent but visibly excited, then at Maki, who seemed to understand everything. His enhancer's intuition told him a real solution was at hand, so he shook his head and stopped asking questions. Knight watched them disappear down the corridor. Suddenly, Finks slapped his shoulder and asked sarcastically, "What's up with that bet you made with him? If you lose, what happens to me, your partner? Or, did you bet me, too?" Ah. I didn't think that far ahead. Knight jumped with fake realization and looked at Finks flatteringly. Well, I think that Krilo seems pretty capable. It wouldn't be so bad to get along with him, right? We just need to try harder and beat him. And anyway, he pulled Phaeton close, he even lent me Phaeton, didn't he? Finks was left speechless. That was so irresponsible it almost made sense. Let me go. No, I still need to check your wound. I don't want it. The only thing left in the room was the bickering between Phaeton and the clinging Knight. Krilo. After they had walked some distance, Maki suddenly spoke. What is it, Maki? Krilo asked. That Knight, she said. He doesn't look like you, but I kept feeling like I was looking at you. Haha, is that so? Krilo chuckled softly. If that boy were more ambitious and he himself more idle, maybe they really would be alike. He was in for a tough fight. Talks times both sides times undercurrents. Author's note, quick survey again, should I add a time-traveling female character? Knight and Krilo will reconcile soon, and the next arc may involve this. Let me know if you'd rather avoid that. That afternoon, Knight used Serato to relay Krilo's proposal to the District 12 mayor, Fendic. That woman Ricardo has always had ambition. She's held back for years. Now she finally dares act. Fendic sneered. The Elders' Council isn't just for show. No one welcomes another competitor in that ring. And she dares bring it up first. What do you think, Serato? Serato paused and thought. I think she's received a promise, or is confident she'll secure a seat. Otherwise, with her caution and scheming, she'd never move like this. Ha! Exactly what I thought, Fendic laughed, standing. Unite with District 12. She probably wants to use my men as expendable vanguards. Tell the messenger I need time to consider. Yes, Mr. District Chief, Serato replied. That's the situation, Knight reported to Krilo. Hey, you're not doing anything shady, are you? Uvogin asked loudly, only to fall silent when Knight gave him a long, cold stare. A chill ran down his back and he snorted twice, choosing silence. Krilo smiled. I understand. It's normal for Fendic to resist. Uvogin, there's no need for Knight to interfere in this, right? He turned to the blonde, blue-eyed boy. Knight waved a hand. Well, Krilo, you'd better act fast, or you'll lose. He grinned, raised his eyebrows, and left the room. Krilo, what now? Uvogin asked anxiously. He'd already heard about the bet from Maki, and he didn't want to lose to that cocky blonde kid. Don't worry, Uvogin, Krilo said calmly. Being rejected once or twice is normal. Ricardo doesn't want to split too much of the reward, so these negotiations were inevitable. It's all about finding the other party's bottom line. He straightened his dark suit and said, let's report back to our employer. Author's note, since I'm not skilled at writing political negotiations, this section will be abridged and focus only on key plot developments. March 2, 1985. After Fendic's initial evasion, District 13 Governor Ricardo sent Krilo again with an offer to infiltrate the Elders' Council. Fendic still refused to meet them, and even Serrato, his chief underling, didn't show. March 5. Ricardo's envoy visited for the third time and was once again rebuffed. But a source hinted that Fendic was starting to waver. March 8. Ricardo and Fendic met privately in a building at the border of their districts. Only the two mayors were on the 10th floor, all others waited below. Leading District 12's delegation was Serrato, but interestingly, by his side stood a young blonde, blue-eyed stranger, one whom few had seen before. March 9th to 15th. The two leaders met several more times. No formal agreement was reached. Serrato, "That woman's offer is too generous, it's hard to refuse," said Fendic, after one meeting. "What's your decision, Mr. District Chief?" asked Serrato, never one to advise, just the kind of loyal enforcer Fendic needed. Even with night controlling him, Serrato kept his words sparse to avoid slipping up. Fendic stepped to a tall window, pulled aside thick purple curtains, and stared out. "I want her offer, but not in exchange for half my men and resources." "You mean, we should still bargain with her?" Serrato asked. "Of course," Fendic growled. "If I lose half my influence in District 12, I'm finished. Even if I get a seat on the council, I'd be powerless." He stood silently for a while before turning back. "Serrato, activate our secret agents. I want to know Ricardo's true leverage, what secrets she's hiding." "But isn't that too much?" Serrato protested. Those informants had been buried deep. Exposing them now would be costly. "It's nothing," Fendic said. "Some sacrifices are necessary. I've decided." "Yes, right away," Serrato obeyed. He may have felt regret, but the knight inside him felt none at all. March 19th. Still, no progress in the negotiation. In District 13, the beautiful Ricardo paced restlessly in her office. "Damn that Fendic. How much more does he want? Half my forces are committed already. If I don't keep pushing the others, all of this will collapse." She clenched her fists, her charming face twisted with frustration. "Don't worry, Ricardo," said Curlo, calm as ever. Chapter 19. Sitting quietly on the sofa opposite the desk, Ricardo glared at the woman losing her temper. "I know how to force Fendic to give in." "Really?" Curlo. Ricardo looked at him in relief, as if he were her salvation. His strategy to infiltrate the Elders' Council impressed her. She hurried over, leaned in, and urged, "What is it? Tell me." Curlo smiled faintly. "Since he doubts our sincerity, why not?" March 24th, backchannel report from Serrato's agents in District 13. "Is this intel reliable?" Fendic still sounded skeptical. "It's what the agents uncovered, unless they've been compromised," Serrato replied. Fendic reread the report, clenched it, and snapped, "All right, I've had enough." Serrato. "Yes, sir. How's the training going with those recruits from Districts 12 and 13? "They're well trained, but still inexperienced." "Good. Send them out. Choose my top quarter to go with them. The rest. Launch the attack on District 13 at the agreed time. Serrato, I want you leading it personally. And get Curlo, dead or alive." "Yes, District Chief." Serrato's voice echoed with excitement. Fighting times Knight's analysis times surrender. Knight stretched lazily. "So boring, we have to fight." He stretched his arms and a fierce glint appeared in his eyes. "If we must lose face, at least let me see your strength first, Curlo." Curlo smirked. "Of course. I'm eager to see yours." He braced himself. Here's how it led to this point. Once Fendic placed his forces, word came from the Elders' Council within a week. Ricardo and Fendic departed to meet them, but before leaving, Fendic ordered Serrato to attack District 13 2 hours after their departure. Knight followed orders, with some glee. He preferred fighting a smaller force and saw this battle as decisive for his bet with Krilo. So he dismissed any who stayed behind and led Finks, Phaeton, and controlled Serato into District 13. Krilo also brought a group, Maki, Yuvagan, Nobunaga, plus a blonde girl and a large man. But both sides viewed these as cannon fodder. It would come down to Krilo versus Knight. Knight glanced at Phaeton before preparing to strike. But Phaeton lunged at Yuvagan with his iron umbrella, retribution for past taunts. Treating the battle as choreography, Knight switched his Serato, puppet, into auto-control. Finks jumped in too, silent but fierce. Both Knight and Krilo smiled coldly. To the people of Meteor City, mercy meant weakness, but failure meant death. Knight materialized dual daggers, launching a whistling attack toward Krilo's neck. Krilo tilted aside and retaliated with a punch, but Knight caught it with his free hand. They traded dozens of blows, each testing the other, keeping their true power hidden. Krilo, remember I'm from the operations branch? Knight revealed with a grin, dagger vanishing. A small chip emerged from between his fingers, and his speed halved. Krilo's eyes widened. The chip, Knight controlled through it. He leapt back, dodging danger, and summoned a bloodstained book with a palm print. A reader skill? Knight's smile deepened. He'd lured Krilo into revealing his powers. He'd given away the chip ability to bait Krilo. The thief book opened wide, releasing a black whip. A crack snapped against Knight's arm, carving a bleeding groove. A telekinesis-powered book. Knight tensed, realizing Krilo had both materialization and transformation skills, a rare, lethal combo. He braced. Krilo flicked the whip away, switching pages. Dozens of razor wind blades shot forward. Knight's eyes shrank. Wind manipulation? Transformation-based. But the book also produced solid items. That was materialization. 2 different Nen types. Only space left. The whip materialized again, buzzing with power. Soon, Knight's arms were a graffito of blood and scars. "Hey, looks like time for my trump card," Knight exclaimed. He drew another chip, this time not for control, but for self-enhancement. He plunged it into his neck, not Krilo, and in an explosive burst, his aura magnified. Chapter 20. Target, Krilo. Order, engage. Knight's eyes flickered, blank, emotionless. His aura intensified, his movements now rivaling even Phaeton's full power. Krilo used condensation, but already, Knight was on him. Within a second, 20 to 30 rapid strikes landed. Krilo blocked half, but the rest smashed into him, leaving bruises of purple and blue. Krilo, only able to defend, fell into a struggle beneath this overwhelming surge. Moments later, he spat blood, a rib cracked. Nobunaga leaped in to assist, but even he couldn't contain Knight's storm. Nearby, Maki ensnared Finks with Nen threads, while Franklin and Pakinoda engaged Serato. Caught in the fray, they managed only to steady the tide. "This kid's insane," Nobunaga cursed, while Maki's expression hardened in respect. This was no ordinary negotiation, it was proof of Knight's strength. Just as pressure peaked, Knight suddenly leapt back, his lifeless gaze snapping to life. "Ah, it's like that," he blurted, and slowed to a crawl. "Stop, Krilo, I've run out of Nen." Krilo halted, looking at Nobunaga and Maki. Then turned to Knight with sharp focus. "So, you admit defeat?" Exhaustion showed on Knight's face. He calmly drew a remote, pressed a button, and Serato's head exploded. His body collapsed with a thud. Instantly, Knight looked revitalized. "Honestly," he said with a steady smile, "even halved, you were dangerous. But my calculations were off. I've lost this round, and I accept it. Still, seems I fit with you fine, Krilo." Running Serato had consumed half his aura, even using a reckless trick couldn't sustain him. With Serato dead, the auto-control freed, but facing 3 foes was beyond him. So, Knight conceded cleanly. Join times situation times trust and downtime. Trying to fool us, kid? Nobunaga sneered, unconvinced. How could that be? I killed Serato. Knight shrugged. With Serato dead, Fendic would no longer protect him. Kurlo's gaze softened. Knight was presentable. He held off Nobunaga with a glance, then extended his hand. Battle's done. Maki, release Finks. And Knight, welcome as my companion. Gladly. Knight accepted the handshake. Kurlo turned to Finks. And you? Finks stepped forward, calm. I'm ready. Hello, Kurlo. He shook Kurlo's hand. Kurlo called out, Phaeton, Uvogin, let's move on to the next mission. Phaeton snorted, dropped his umbrella, and fell in behind. Uvogin joined in, cursing under his breath. Before Kurlo could issue more orders, Knight spoke up. Kurlo, Ricardo's goal aligns with yours, getting into the Elders' Council. But you can't brashly imitate her. She and Fendic both bet their lives on that seat. Finks, you've been around mayor circles, your thoughts? Finks smiled wryly, you need half the Elder support. Guys like Fendic? He'll be cold. Kurlo considered. Knight, you seem well informed on the council. Got any ideas on how to help me use it? Knight met his gaze. Depends on what you want. Kurlo halted. Setting aside all politeness, he said softly, I want one box, records of my family, hidden in the Senate Council's vault. 3 shadowed lines slashed across Knight's brow. He looked at Kurlo's allies. Family? To a Meteor City survivor it was unnecessary. Hard? Kurlo pressed. Knight chuckled. I'll draft a plan. But what about here? He gestured to the ruined battlefield and the simmering district feud. If Fendic and Ricardo were truly dead, Kurlo could suppress unrest. Kurlo nodded, then it's settled. Can't speak for Ricardo, but Fendic? He's a dead man, Knight said matter-of-factly. Remember the pen I lost? Yeah, bomb in it. He's probably waiting in hell. Brilliant. Kurlo smiled. Now, let's go to the White Building. He referred to Ricardo's residence and office in District 13. Lead the way. Kurlo's gaze lingered on Knight. He'd admitted defeat, but chosen to stay. That unwillingness meant Knight wouldn't be predictable or meek. Trusting him was risky, but necessary. As they reached the White Building, Kurlo reminded his team of his fetch orders: defeat Ricardo's guards, secure documents, unify her outposts under his command. Only Knight stayed back. Kurlo leaned close. How deep is your hold on District 12? District 12? Knight shrugged. Sorry, been here less than a month. Chapter 21. It took me most of my time to control the Celato to approach Fendic and obtain intelligence. If I hadn't wanted to meet you and needed a suitable platform, I probably wouldn't even know where I would be hiding. Want to see me? Kurlo laughed. I don't have any impression of you in my memory, I guess you haven't seen me before. Can you tell me why? Reason? The Knight looked up at the sky and thought for a while, then turned to look at him. There doesn't seem to be any special reason. It's just curiosity. He squinted and smiled. Hee, you are really curious. A smile appeared on Kurlo's face, but the color in his eyes deepened. He had only been in District 12 for a month, but he'd successfully infiltrated the most trusted hand of the district chief and had it under his control. He'd also successfully performed this role, just to get a chance to meet the Knight on equal footing. Kurlo would never deny that if he'd met the man who captured Phaeton under other circumstances, he would have at least a 50% chance of letting Uvogin and the others besiege and kill him outright. There simply hadn't been the time then to handle the matter slowly. For such a person, Kurlo could only be thankful that his purpose wasn't to kill him, otherwise today's situation would be hard to predict. Then my order to you is to control the situation in District 12, Kurlo said. Whether you support a puppet or use Fendic's original team, Knight, I hope that the war between District 12 and District 13 will be completely settled within 3 days. Okay, Krilo, I'll try my best. The Knight smiled, waved, and quickly disappeared out the door. Krilo watched the spot where he vanished for a long time before turning his head away. No one knew what he'd been thinking about just now. The beginning of trust times invitation times came. Later, the Knight lay on his back on the roof of an independent 4-story building in District 13, staring at the gray sky above. Occasionally, a small bird would fly over, only to be struck by a small stone flicked by someone, losing its chance to continue flying for no reason. How boring, he sighed and closed his eyes again. It was very easy to establish a puppet in District 12. Fendic's men had been deployed en masse, leaving few others behind. News from the Elders' Council confirmed the tragic end of Fendic and Ricardo. The Knight used a mix of carrot and stick to win over weaker factions and implicitly threatened others, successfully calming the remaining small forces that had been restless following Fendic's collapse. Though minor frictions persisted, neither the Knight nor Krilo cared. Everything went smoothly for Krilo in District 13. Although he was the true power behind Ricardo's remains, Krilo, for reasons, only promoted a puppet and stayed hidden, studying information provided by the Elders' Council through the Knight and Finks. As a result, he hadn't assigned tasks for days. Bored, the Knight went to the rooftop of his base, as Uvagin and the others called it, to get some fresh air. "Knight, Krilo is calling for you." Maki's cold voice came. The Knight opened his eyes and saw the purple-haired girl at the rooftop exit. "Okay, I'll be there soon." The Knight jumped up, putting on a smile. Krilo's room was nearly filled with books, every bit of free space taken by shelves. He was holding a historical biography he just started. When the Knight entered, Krilo looked up and nodded slightly. "What do you want from me?" the Knight asked. "Ah, it's about the plan you gave me the day before yesterday," Krilo said gently. "Knight, it seems you didn't give me a detailed implementation plan." Indeed, the plan had been vague, both of them were cautious. With no real trust yet, why waste time? The follow-up visit was proof enough. But even so, Krilo visiting the Knight signaled something. Could he be trusted? The Knight didn't hold back. "Krilo, what are you thinking? Tell me something definite and I'll make a definite plan." There was a gleam in Krilo's eyes, but he stayed silent. The Knight then tried another angle, barely revealed under his calm veneer. "After getting the artifact you want, do you want your relationship with the Elders to be friendly, neutral, or hostile?" Was Krilo planning a quick strike and retreat, or aiming to maintain ties with the Elders? Krilo realized the question was really about Meteor Street. "Knight, try to make plans based on not angering the Elders' Council," Krilo said. Maybe it wasn't accidental that the man had thrown him on Meteor Street. The Knight was silent for a moment, then smiled. "Okay, I'll come up with a plan as soon as possible." He nodded and left. "I am the dividing line." Krilo was patient in pursuit of his goals. He grew his influence across the last 3 districts of Meteor Street and slowly built ties with district chiefs based on the Knight's plan. Several months passed. Then Krilo received an invitation from the Elders' Council and prepared to go to District 1 to meet key figures. "Uvagin, Maki, Phaeton, Pakinoda, and Knight, come with me. Franklin, Nobunaga, and Finks will stay at the base. Knight, you must check in every other day and update on base status." Krilo summoned them. "Ha ha ha, I've long wanted to see the Elders' Council in action," Uvagin said excitedly. The Knight took out a notebook and smiled. "I heard District 1 has many treasures. You can't go there, tell me what you want and I'll bring it back." Krilo's eyes gleamed at the opportunity. He always knew how to win hearts. Finks listed his demands without hesitation. Nobunaga wanted rare swords. Franklin didn't ask for much, but with his pet Shouty, he asked for interesting novelties. The knight wrote everything down and promised, definitely. After the briefing, Krilo led the 5 toward District 1. Meanwhile, someone in the Elders' Council seat was watching eagerly. Meteor Street's situation wasn't a secret. Krilo's actions in Districts 12 and 13 had been substantial. Within months, he'd become the underground emperor of the last 3 districts. The elders had mixed feelings, some admired him, some sneered with caution, others observed quietly. Krilo didn't yet know how many dangers and undercurrents awaited him on this District 1 journey. Districts 1 through 3 were the wealthy area of Meteor Street. Far from the grime of the lower districts, the streets were clean and lined with shops and luxurious establishments. As Krilo and his group walked the wide avenues, it felt like stepping into another world. Even the calm Krilo was slightly surprised by the prosperity, but the surprise quickly gave way to a spark of interest and opportunity. Hey hunters! Short break. Because YouTube likes it when I transform content, so here's me. Transforming. Right now. 1, 2, 3. Anyway. Apparently Togashi created the Phantom Troupe in just 1 week. He needed villains fast, and ended up creating one of anime's most iconic criminal groups. Now let's keep going. Chapter 22. Z was also here for the first time, so they weren't so calm about what they saw. Although they continued to follow Krilo, they looked around curiously, chatting about everything new. Uvagin had already been eager to head over to what looked like a bar to check things out. Phaeton covered his face, his golden eyes visibly brighter. Only the knight, with memories from his previous life, pretended to show interest but maintained a blank expression that couldn't be read. The headquarters of the Council of Elders was located in District 1. It was a massive complex, occupying about 1/5 of the district's area, and immediately caught the knight's attention. The main entrance alone was 30 meters wide, flanked by 20 muscular guards standing upright like marble statues. "Is this the Council of Elders?" Krilo said softly, his eyes growing deep and unreadable. Waiting for Times Houston's invitation times cut off. When Krilo and his group appeared in District 1, they were instantly noticed by the Council of Elders. They hadn't even waited 5 minutes at the gate when several people came out. Leading them was a tall, handsome man in a suit, gray-haired with observant brown eyes. He inspected Krilo closely, then glanced at Uvagin, who was even taller and bulkier. As for the short Phaeton, the baby-faced knight, and the 2 girls, he completely ignored them. "Are you the one Elder Rest wants to see? The Elder is dealing with other important matters now. Please follow me to the temporary residence. We'll talk when the Elder has time," he said, then turned to lead the way. He seemed to mutter under his breath, "I really can't see what these little brats are capable of." Pakinoda and Maki remained calm and composed. The knight leaned slightly on Phaeton, subtly restraining him from reacting. Krilo had been smiling since their arrival, and even after hearing the man's words, he pretended not to notice and replied politely, "Then thank you for your trouble." The residence arranged for Krilo and his companions was a house about 200 meters from the council's headquarters. Though far cleaner and more respectable than their base in District 13, it still paled compared to the buildings they had passed. The man who brought them left after only one warning: District 1 is not like the others. "So they're just going to dump us here?" Uvagin was already fuming, practically bouncing with frustration. But he was held back by Krilo's sharp gaze and didn't lose his temper. "Uvagin, I won't allow you to cause trouble until we understand the situation," Krilo said. "Maki, stay with Uvagin for now." "Okay." Maki nodded in agreement. "Pakinoda, come with me. Knight and Phaeton will be a team. One team stays back each day, while the other 2 go out to collect intelligence," Krilo instructed. Then he added to the knight, "Hand out the communicators." The knight smiled and took out 6 mobile phones, distributing them. He specifically reminded them, "I've installed temperature sensors and trackers. I hope I won't need to use them to find any of you." Then he gave a short tutorial, especially for Yuvagan. "Alright, I won't be going out for now. You can begin," Krilo concluded. "I am the dividing line." The Council of Elders seemed to have forgotten all about inviting Krilo. For several days, Elder Rest sent no messages. On the fourth day, instead, a man claiming to be the district chief's secretary visited and handed Krilo an invitation to a banquet set for 3 days later. "Please tell Mr. Houston that I'll definitely attend," Krilo said, his eyes flashing with interest. Although accepting an invitation from the district chief before an official summons from the council might raise eyebrows, both Krilo and the knight believed that, if questioned, they could claim they couldn't refuse the master of the territory. Still, it was an unlikely problem. Someone like Houston surely had a strong background and considerable influence. Out of caution, Krilo ordered everyone to avoid overly secluded areas while gathering intelligence. The knight sat at a table in an open-air cafe, organizing recent information on his laptop. Phaeton was engrossed in gaming, having somehow developed a liking for it. They had become familiar with the area, but the idle time had begun to wear on them. At 1 o'clock, when most people grew drowsy, a waiter brought a tray to the seat beside them and set down a cold drink. Then, he placed a note on their table and turned to leave. The knight looked up immediately, while Phaeton, alert, almost drew his umbrella. The waiter's face paled in fear. "Someone just asked me to deliver that," he stammered. "Just now?" The knight smiled politely. "Can you tell me what he looked like?" Seeing the knight remain calm, the waiter relaxed slightly. "A man around 30, wearing sunglasses. I didn't see his face clearly." "Thank you," the knight replied, taking the note. On it was a single line, "See you at 27 South Street at 9 p.m. In the lower right corner was a symbol the knight knew well, a mark he had seen often during his 3 years of study in District 5. It was from his biological father, Goyle, who had never acknowledged him but had trained him for 3 years. The knight's breath caught as Phaeton suddenly snatched the note. "Someone you knew?" he asked. "Yes," the knight nodded. "Are you going to go?" The knight bit his lip, considering. They had been in District 1 for a week. Most people were still observing them, and even with several sources of intelligence, the knight had gathered little of value. Only Houston, the head of District 1, had made contact, on the pretext of his youngest daughter's birthday. That was more a formality than a signal of alliance. The knight wanted more insight. Perhaps Goyle would share something because of their blood tie. "I want to go," said the knight. Phaeton's golden eyes flickered. "You sure you can go alone?" "It shouldn't be dangerous," the knight answered. Phaeton said no more and resumed his game. The knight, now distracted, shut his laptop, sipped his coffee, and packed up. Then he called Phaeton back. At exactly 9 p.m., the knight arrived at the address on the note. No one was in sight. Then a figure emerged from a nearby alley. It was the mayor of District 5, Goyle. "Follow me," Goyle said quietly and disappeared into the alley. The knight followed without hesitation. After several turns, Goyle opened a hidden door embedded in a wall and let the knight in. From the outside, it seemed like a solid-walled building, but it was actually a guarded estate with many servants. Goyle led the knight inside. Strangely, none of the servants, or bodyguards, seemed to notice them. They continued their duties as if nothing had happened. The knight couldn't help but admire their discipline. They arrived at the main hall. Goyle nodded to a man who appeared to be the butler, then brought the knight to the study upstairs. "I never meant for you to be noticed by the Council of Elders," Goyle said coldly as he shut the study door. "I may not have told you clearly, but I never expected that in just a year, you would actively involve yourself with the Council." Whether it was the knight or Krilo who initiated contact with the Council, outsiders would assume they were aligned. The thought angered Goyle. Chapter 23. Could he really be someone these guys could mess with? Even if he was, He have no choice but to compromise. What can I do? I lost the bet. The knight laughed shamelessly. Perhaps even he hadn't realized how much more relaxed he was in front of Goyle. What is this? Looking at the boy who shared his blood, Goyle couldn't help but frown. Leave District 1. Whether you go back to District 13 or District 5, or even leave Meteor Street entirely, I can help you get your ID. Just don't stay here anymore. Was the situation that serious? The knight's eyelids twitched. How many of the 5 elders and 18 counselors will make a move? Goyle's face turned cold. He was a man of few expressions. Narrowing his eyes, he replied, "Knight, that's not something I can reveal. Honestly, I shouldn't even be here talking to you today." His meaning was clear. Goyle wouldn't help him further or share any information. He only offered him a path to survival out of familial obligation. The knight lowered his head, a little disappointed. "No, I still want to stay." He added lightly, "There are some things I have to do, and getting recognition is the first step. Father, if this puts you in a difficult position, just do what you must." He turned to leave. "Stop!" Goyle barked. "In Meteor Street, the most important thing is strength," he warned one last time. "I understand, Mr. Goyle." The knight didn't look back. Goyle didn't stop him. The two quietly severed the only bond they shared. Departure times assassination times Krillow's response. It was a sweltering summer day, but the knight felt a chill in his heart as he walked back, lost in thought. He had to admit that Goyle held a high position in his heart, higher even than Krillow or the others, at least for now. The knight had once scoffed at Goyle's so-called protection and regarded the 3 years of learning under him as nothing more than a fallen gold ingot. Due to his memories of a previous life, the knight never saw Goyle as a real father. During that time, he absorbed knowledge like a sponge, used every benefit to its fullest, as any Meteor Street native would, but gave no true sincerity in return. Even when Goyle asked him to leave a year ago, the knight had held no resentment. So why did this simple severing of ties today hurt so much? There was a faint sound near his ear. With a soft swish, a sleeve arrow flew from the darkness, aimed directly at the knight's heart. The young man didn't even seem aware of it, continuing to walk as usual. But the arrow veered slightly, piercing his left shoulder instead of his chest. The force drove it through completely. Blood burst out instantly, soaking half his clothes in seconds. "Ah! So this is what pain feels like?" The knight sneered. He reached to touch the sticky blood, the rusty scent assaulting his nose. No wonder some people are bloodthirsty. Blood can be beautiful at times, he murmured to himself, completely absorbed in his own world. Even the hidden assassin began to wonder if this man was insane. "No matter. My mission is just to kill him." The assassin raised his crossbow again, aimed, and fired. As the bolt loosed, the assassin lost sight of his target. In the next second, a cold blade touched his neck. A chill surged through his body. Then a childish voice whispered behind him. "You heard me? I'm in a bad mood. What should I do with you? Why don't you tell me? How should I punish you?" Discovered. The assassin was shocked. He shut his eyes and stayed silent. In their line of work, failure meant death. No words? Ready to die? The knight smiled faintly and drove the mind blade into the assassin's cervical spine with ruthless precision. The pain was intense, but silent, leaving the assassin paralyzed. He convulsed on the ground in small arcs. After more than 10 minutes, the assassin's strength was drained, and his face turned as pale as paper. The knight slightly twisted his blade and asked, "Who sent you?" I won't tell. Just kill me." The assassin whispered. "If you were sent to assassinate me, does that mean my other companions will be targeted too?" The knight didn't wait for a reply, continuing calmly. "You can't make me talk." The assassin gritted out. "Oh, I see. So it really was someone from the Council of Elders, the knight said coldly and certainly. The assassin's pupils dilated, then blurred. The mind blade vanished from his neck. The knight stood, adjusted his clothes, glanced at the now dried wound, and walked off swiftly. He finally understood what Goyle meant with his final words. Whether the elders thought Curlo and his team were opportunists writing the deaths of District Chiefs 12 and 13, or simply viewed them as too young and reckless, they saw them as a threat. Letting them grow unchecked wasn't an option. Killing them was the safest path. Judging from Goyle's tone and urgency, at least half the elders must have agreed. No meeting, just murder? Then I'll need to change my plan. The ancient stillness in the knight's emerald eyes began to ripple like boiling water. As it calmed, he pushed open the door to their temporary residence. The first to see him was Phaeton, sitting on the front steps. His golden eyes instantly locked onto the blood on the knight's body, and his hand on the umbrella tightened. "Was it the person you met?" he asked darkly, with a hint of viciousness. "No." The knight winked to show he was fine. "Are they back?" He glanced into the empty living room. "Uvagin and Maki haven't returned yet," Curlo said, emerging from another room. His eyes paused on the knight's wound, clearly pondering who could have injured someone of his caliber. "Oh? I wonder if they'll dodge the assassins," the knight said indifferently. He remembered how the man who welcomed them had stared sharply at Uvagin, the strongest among them. "So your wound was from an assassination?" Curlo asked thoughtfully. The answer was clear in the knight's expression. "With Maki there, they'll be fine. Her instincts are sharp, any assassin will fail." "Then, Curlo, what's your decision?" the knight asked flatly. Curlo's dark eyes flickered, and a graceful smile curved his lips. "In that case, let's show them just how strong we are." "Yeah, that's what I was thinking," the knight replied lazily, a fierce gleam flashing in his green eyes. Half an hour later, Uvagin and Maki returned. Maki was fine, but Uvagin was drenched in blood, though no one could say how much of it was his and how much belonged to others. Maki briefly recounted the attack. "The assassinations have begun. They want to eliminate all of us." "That's your read on it?" Curlo asked. "All right then. Knight, contact Nobunaga and the others. Have them stay alert. Let our puppets draw the elders' fire when we return. The three should stay hidden. If a good chance arises, they can take out a few rats. Otherwise, stay passive." "Understood," the knight nodded. From tomorrow until 2 days later, the banquet in Houston. Chapter appears to cut off here. Chapter 24. There will be no more group activities for now. You may go out at any time. If you encounter an assassin, make the scene as loud and public as possible, Curlo instructed thoughtfully. "But remember one thing, all the assassins must be killed." "Yes." Tantrum times banquet times races invitation. That night, Curlo put down a book he had been reading halfway and reached for the coffee cup on the table, only to find it empty. He glanced at the clock on the wall, 3 a.m. Smiling slightly, he stood and headed for the kitchen to brew another cup. As he passed the living room, he noticed the blue glow of a computer screen. He walked over with his cup in hand and saw the knight deleting a folder. When the mouse hovered over the yes option, the cursor hesitated for 3 or 4 seconds before the click came. "Curlo," the knight said without turning, "the situation is very unfavorable to us. Do you need me to draft a retreat plan?" "Hey, is that what you're thinking, knight?" Curlo chuckled. "Tell me, how bad is it?" The knight answered plainly, "I estimate that half or more of the elders harbor ill will toward us. Another third are still watching and waiting. Some are hoping to use us. Those who actually favor us? Less than 10%. Less than 10%? That meant maybe 1 or 2 elders were actually willing to support them. No, support the current rulers of Meteor Street's final 3 districts. Really? That's still too little," Crelot said with sarcastic emphasis. "Did the person you met today give you that intel?" he asked, feigning casualness. No. Everything had been deduced by the knight through recent intel and years of accumulated information. A flicker of suspicion passed through Crelot's eyes. "Knight, you're not yourself today." Since returning earlier that evening, Knight had barely smiled. It was starkly different from the usual easygoing demeanor. And Phaeton had mentioned that Knight had gone to meet someone that night. "No need to test me now." The knight raised his head coldly, his face twisted slightly by suppressed rage. "Crelot, I don't have the patience to discuss betrayal with you. If you really believe I've turned, just kill me." He slammed the laptop shut, didn't glance again at Crelot, and stormed off toward his room, followed by a loud bang of the door. "Oh? You're angry?" Crelot's smile didn't fade, but curiosity lit his gaze. Whoever the knight had met clearly held significance to him. It had been 5 months since April. The knight always acted indifferent. Even when he smiled and joked, there was a deep-rooted detachment. Even Finks, who joined alongside him, hadn't earned any real connection. That kept Crelot on guard. But what puzzled him more was that, despite knowing he was suspected, the knight never once tried to clear those suspicions. If he wasn't a spy, then Crelot had to accept the fact that trust simply didn't come easily to him. That made him all the more curious about the person who had made the knight drop his mask of indifference. "I am the dividing line." The mansion on the east side of Meteor Street's District 1 was lively tonight. It was both the 18th birthday party of District Chief Houston's daughter, Catherine, and the engagement celebration for the grandson of Eldo, the third seat on the Council of Elders. The guests were all prestigious figures, and the number of black-suited bodyguards was staggering. No one here was allowed to make a misstep. "Why the hell do we have to wear this stuff? It's so tight, I'll rip it just raising my hand." Yuvagin raised his arm, tearing the suit under his armpit with a loud rip. He grimaced with frustration. "It's a banquet. Dressing properly is a matter of courtesy," Crelot replied as he adjusted his tie in the mirror. "Even if half the guests hate us, we can't afford to lose the goodwill of the other half." He glanced at Yuvagin. "Go let Maki sew that up." "What a pain." Yuvagin grumbled as he left the room. Crelot returned to the mirror. Satisfied with his appearance, he stepped into the living room. Everyone else was already gathered. The girls were dressed to impress. Pakinota tugged uncomfortably at her blue lace skirt, while Maki was sewing Yuvagin's jacket. Phaeton wore a sleek black suit, though his exposed face was dark with annoyance at the lack of a mask. The knight, in a white suit, stood beside him, smiling and chatting. When Crelot appeared, the knight deliberately ignored him. Since their confrontation, the knight's public demeanor remained unchanged, but whenever alone with Crelot, he went stone-faced. This left Crelot at a loss. It had just been a question. But the knight wasn't one to cling to grudges. He was simply looking for an outlet for his pain over severing ties with Goyle. "All right, let's go," Crelot said with a cruel smile as he opened the door. They were not welcome guests. Especially with over a dozen bloody incidents linked to them in District 1 over the past 2 days. But despite the deaths, every case had eyewitnesses confirming they'd acted in self-defense. Those who'd lost men had no choice but to swallow their blood and bitterness. When Crelot's group arrived at Houston's banquet, they were met with a sea of hostile stares, murderous, contemptuous, hateful. Some women retreated in fear. "Trash," Phaeton sneered at the gazes cast their way. Some were filled with malice, others with hunger. He clenched his fists, regretting leaving his iron umbrella behind. "Crelot, I want to kill someone." "Patience, Phaeton. Your time will come," Crelot said with a smile. "First, we see how our host reacts. Killing someone here would be impolite." He looked toward a middle-aged man standing at the banquet's edge, watching them intently. Judging by his clothes, bearing, and prior intelligence, That man was Houston, mayor of District 1. The knight followed Kurlo's gaze and memorized Houston's face. "I'll be back shortly. If anything happens, I'll call," he said, disappearing into the crowd before Kurlo could reply. "Kurlo?" Pakinoda began. "He'll be fine," Maki interrupted coldly. "I think any trouble is more likely to find us." "Is that so?" Kurlo said thoughtfully. Just then, a handsome man in a white tuxedo approached them. After scanning their faces, he smiled and said to Kurlo, "You must be Kurlo Lucifer, the rising star from District 13. My name is Isaac, assistant to Elder Race of the Council of Elders. He would like to invite you to the lounge for a conversation." "Elder Race?" Kurlo's eyes glimmered. He lowered his head politely. "It would be my honor." He turned to his team. "Wait here. If anything happens, follow Maki's lead." Yuvagan looked like he wanted to protest, but Phaeton snorted, and the four watched silently as Kurlo followed Isaac into a side hallway. Reminiscing? Times trap, times kill without mercy. Kurlo followed Isaac through a side door and down a corridor about 100 meters long. At the end, Isaac stopped in front of an ebony door adorned with ancient carvings. "Elder Race is inside. Please enter." "Oh?" Kurlo tilted his head and looked sideways at Isaac, but... Chapter 25. He paused for a second or two, then reached out and pushed the door open. The first thing that caught his eye was a gloomy dark gray tone, gray wallpaper, gray floor-length curtains, and a massive oil portrait hanging on the right-hand wall. On the other side of the room, an old man with white hair and a beard sat calmly on a leather sofa. Kurlo carefully took in the room's layout without revealing it and activated Gyo to confirm that no third person was present. Then he stepped forward, stopping about 3 to 4 meters from the old man, and said with a polite smile, "Are you Elder Race?" "My name is Kurlo Lucifer." He bowed slightly, seemingly respectful, but entirely on guard. "Kurlo Lucifer. I never thought I'd truly meet you." The old man observed all his movements clearly but continued speaking without reacting. "I saw you once when you were about 2 months old, but," he sighed deeply. Kurlo gave a soft ah and asked with anxious curiosity, "Elder Race, you knew my parents?" "Then they..." His dark eyes filled with a mix of pain and suppressed hatred. "Oh, to be exact, your grandfather and I were close friends," Race replied calmly. "The Lucifer family was once one of the most renowned mafia families in the world. The Council of Elders maintained ties with every mafia group globally." He gave a brief explanation, then added, "But now, you may be the only one left of the Lucifer family." The boy with black eyes quieted, listening in silence before asking, "Then why has Elder Race called me here? After all, nothing in Meteor Street came without a price." Race only shook his head tiredly. He pulled a pocket watch from his coat, opened it with a click, and stared long at the photo inside. "You were probably 3 years old when the tragedy occurred," Race murmured, lost in thought. "From what I discovered afterward, the Lucifer family was exterminated for monopolizing a certain treasure. Several gangs coveted it. Your grandfather sent a distress call, but my people arrived too late. Then... And you had me abandoned in Meteor Street?" Kurlo narrowed his eyes, a dangerous gleam buried within them. "Ah, you're right. If the Lucifer family lacked the strength to survive here, then it was only natural for them to perish." Race nodded lightly, words that he would never say to his best friend's grandson. Yet it was precisely this blunt truth that made Kurlo find him slightly more believable. Still, Kurlo remained silent. "But my care for the younger generation ends here," Race said, closing the pocket watch and standing up. He walked slowly toward the oil painting. "Kurlo, sometimes it's fine to show ambition. The last 3 districts of Meteor Street may not matter to others, but if you truly have power, that's another story." Kurlo had already caught the real message. The implication of Race's words was, A blinding light suddenly flashed across Krolow's face. He raised his arms instinctively to shield himself. Simultaneously, a rumbling mechanical sound echoed. The dark, heavy iron door slammed shut between him and Race. The door behind him was kicked open with force, and several large, muscular men stormed in like predators, gleaming weapons in hand, all aimed directly at Krolow. Krolow's eyes turned cold and bottomless, like the river Styx. In an instant, a blood-stained book appeared in his hands. Narrative note: Elder Race's so-called care for the younger generation meant that he had used his authority to suppress any formal retaliation for the chaos Krolow caused in the lower districts. However, as Krolow began extending his influence across other districts and probing the Elders' Council for deeper benefits, Race saw ambition he could no longer tolerate. And so, he struck first. Meanwhile, Maki suddenly froze mid-sip of wine. Krolow is in danger. What? Uvagin roared. The banquet hall, filled with laughter and conversation, fell silent at his booming voice. Numerous angry and wary stares turned their way. What are you all staring at? Uvagin snapped, shifting uncomfortably under the judgmental gazes. Uvagin, calm down, Pakinoda whispered. She had already spotted the banquet's host, District 1 Chief Houston, striding toward them with an unpleasant expression. You may be my guests, Houston said grimly, but your behavior just now was far from respectful. I'm giving you one chance to leave, otherwise. Before he could finish, Maki sensed over a dozen malicious Nen users encircling them. With Krolow absent, she had no choice but to follow his standing orders and retreat safely. All right, sir, we... No. Krolow hasn't returned yet, Uvagin shouted, interrupting her. A terrible premonition crept into Maki's heart. Uvagin, shut up, she hissed, but it was too late. Houston's killing intent zeroed in on them, and a storm of golden, arrow-shaped Nen constructs rained from the air. Bastard! Uvagin cursed, shielding the two girls with his hulking frame. Phaeton snorted and dodged the first wave, grabbing a few guests as human shields. Damn it, kill them all, Houston roared. The banquet guests had powerful backers, and even if some died, it wouldn't reflect poorly on him. But if the perpetrators escaped, Houston's reputation and authority could be jeopardized, maybe even used to remove him from power. He couldn't afford that. Uvagin, cover Pakinoda and break through. Call us once you're safe. Maki ordered decisively. Among them, only Pakinoda was weak in close combat. Uvagin had to protect her while she and Phaeton handled the rest. Still trying to run? A thug lunged at Maki, but silver threads bloomed between her fingers, slicing the man to pieces in a web of blood. The surrounding enemies were stunned. Who would have thought such a delicate girl could be so savage? She leapt through the opening. Phaeton, however, was struggling. His weapon was still at their residence, and he lacked anything effective. Relying on agility and short bursts of attacks, he harried the enemy, but Houston signaled for reinforcements. Uvagin, as expected, fared much better. His reinforcement-type Nen gave him overwhelming strength and defense. One punch could kill. With Pakinoda providing sharp cover fire, they broke through to the perimeter quickly. Don't let them escape, Houston shouted. He had underestimated them. These young outlaws were far more dangerous than expected. Niji, Masamo, Hogan, use everything. I want them dead. Yes. 3 elite Nen users emerged from a secret entrance. One charged at Uvagin, while the other 2 targeted Phaeton. You all deserve to die. Phaeton already bore several visible wounds. The tyrannical gleam in his eyes burned ever brighter. Suddenly, a strange outfit enveloped him. His aura exploded. Rising sun. Each times night of the day times inference. In a dark alleyway behind the banquet hall, Krolow leaned heavily against a wall, panting. His clothing was soaked in blood, his own and that of his enemies. The men race sent after him were clearly elite, but Krilo was no ordinary man. He had survived. But it had taken time.